Guangsu Province, hundreds of thousands of great mountains. On the rocky and majestic mountains, the Guangmyong cult is nestled. With their vicious demonic art and mysterious demon worshippers, they must be destroyed. They are the forces of rebellion, so we must kill them all. And at the center of the Guangmyong cult is he who said he would punish everyone, a powerful martial artist. He was able to master the ultimate art of the demon lord. The outsiders called this place a demonic cult. If they reached the central plains, the world would be plunged into unprecedented chaos. He, Jan Chaguk, the first son of the head of the Murim Union, will guide these people to the right path. His disciples congratulated him on the end of his secluded practice, since he is their young master. The first son of the head of the Murim Alliance, Jan Chaguk, or as they call him, the 10 strokes of the beast. He was so nicknamed for his ability to counter any fighting technique in just 10 exchanges of blows. So he began to boast the title of most skillful martial artist. At that time, the political situation within the Murim cult was like the calm before the storm. The desire of people to take the place of the next head was building up the intensity of internal conflicts and endless conspiracies. And outside of this unrest, there was an amalgamation of cults that deviated from the accepted teachings and began to call themselves the Apostate Association. Unfortunately, Jan Chaguk was caught up in this wave of political turmoil and poisoned before he reached the age of 30. Opening his eyes, the boy screamed. The thought flashed through his mind. Didn't he die from the poison? He wondered if this was a dream. The guy thought for sure he was going to die, but he'd been kidnapped? At least he's alive. He looked around and saw the glowing spheres. He thought that, judging by the fact that the walls were covered with them, he had been kidnapped by a rather rich and powerful organization. He realized that the circle of suspects who could pull off such a thing was quite wide. The possible kidnappers could not even be counted on all fingers of his hand. If you think about how chaotic the political regime was right now, it wasn't at all surprising that someone wanted to harm him, the first son of the head of the Murim Union. Seeing something that looked like a door, the guy approached it but realized the entrance was completely blocked. Not far from the exit, he saw a bag of grain balls. This is the ration used during training. Young Chaguk realized that this should be enough for several years. There was enough air coming through the cracks of the walls. Weren't they going to kill him? If that was the case, they'll release him when they need him. The guy needs to focus on rebuilding. He decided to start by circulating his chi. He thought it would make them regret leaving him, Jan Chaguk, alive. As soon as the guy started with his circulation, he was immediately struck by lightning. He wondered if it was the effects of the poison. It felt strange. The boy decided to quench his thirst first. When he came to the spring, Ian drank some water and then decided to wash his face. Suddenly, he saw his reflection in the water. The guy got scared, thought he was imagining things. He knew it wasn't his face. Looking at the features of his face, the guy thought he was a man or a woman. It occurred to him to look in his pants. He breathed a sigh of relief and realized he was still a man. Young Chaguk realized that this wasn't his body. The internal energy was too impure. The guy couldn't feel a trace of his own art anywhere. He wondered whose body this was then. No matter how much the guy thought about it now, he wouldn't get an answer. Though a bit exaggerated, he, who was referred to as the most skillful martial artist, had never been in such a state of lostness before. The guy realized he needed to pull himself together. Even if the energy was corrupted, it was still there in this body. So, if he hadn't been kidnapped, the guy's mind had gotten into the body of someone who'd been practicing seclusion. He knew there had to be some clues. After walking a little further, the guy thought he'd finally found it. It looked scratched out for like a century, but he could make it out. The boy thought this was the art the body master was studying. Truly perverse and strange. As he started practicing, he thought to himself, wondering who came up with it. Maybe Drachma? After thinking about it, the guy realized that no, it was too vicious even for him. Yin had never met a great martial art like this after all. On the wall, the boy read the words death and rebirth. He could only become stronger by being exposed to danger. That was what the body's owner had written last. The guy realized that the man died of excess chi. He channeled the energy through the wrong body streams. He needed to follow the source and control it until the energy was rooted in him. Training only on images, he interpreted everything based on common sense alone. But he was wrong. This art seeks to destroy everything. Though proud, It is truly worthy to be called an art that defies the heavens. Walking over to the bag, the guy realized that the amount of grains had noticeably decreased. It must have been at least a few years. He finally learned everything depicted there. Unfortunately, the drawings ended at the pose of the 10th star. Yin thought that he couldn't master her, but just everything before that. The guy had already surpassed the power of his past life and reached an irreversible transition to a new stage. He had also acquired chi equal to 240 years of practice. So being imprisoned there was a blessing for him. As a student, the guy has never had the opportunity to show proper respect, so thanks him for his wisdom. Swore he would not stray from the path of justice with his teachings. His father ruled the Murim world, but the lad was sure he could do more. The same could be said for the art of the senior monks, but this is an unknown art. It's something he wouldn't be able to surpass after spending an entire life practicing past techniques. Bowing, he said that he promises to serve the one who created this art hundreds of years ago as its one and only true master. As a man who walks the path of justice, even if the heavens fall and the earth shakes, his decision will never change. After the promise he made, the guy decided to hit the road. It was time to leave that place. Looking at the passageway, he figured there was still no hint of how to open it. When he would take care of it himself, there was no reason for him to stay there anymore. The current him would not be so easy to defeat, even if one of the 10 strongest Murim practitioners showed up. Breaking down the passage, the boy stepped outside and squinted against the familiar blinding light. As soon as he breathed in a full chest of air, a man sitting under a tree caught his eye. Ian asked for permission to ask. Well, as soon as the man saw him, he immediately shouted at the top of his voice. He couldn't say a word. The guy thought, isn't that mine? After all this time, he met a man who turned out to be mute. Jan Chagak asked the man if he could not speak. The man began to bow, saying that he had committed an unpardonable sin, and then asked to be spared. The guy thought he mistook him for a thug, although he really didn't look good. Asking the man to calm down, the guy asked why he wanted to harm the man. A man screamed he was going to send him into the corridors of 10,000 demons, started begging to be killed, grabbing him by the shoulders. Ian asked what he was doing. The guy asked him to stand up. Suddenly, the man lost consciousness. He didn't realize what a fearful man was. Putting him under a tree, the guy apologized for scaring him, but he had to go. After passing through that forest, a city appeared in front of his eyes. When he came down to its gate, he saw several warriors. As he looked at them, he realized that they were emanating a very strong energy. Such wars were just guarding the entrance. He didn't realize what this place was. Ian saw them approaching. Would he really have to fight? As suddenly, they kneeled before the young master and congratulated him for completing his training. The boy didn't immediately understand why they were calling him young master. Raising his eyes to the entrance, on the sign he read Guanmyong Cult. It's a place tucked away among countless centuries-old and majestic mountains, a place you can't leave so easily once you set foot in its territory. Outsiders call it a demonic cult. The warriors who showed respect called him young master, which means master of the body. The boy didn't understand how this was possible. The son of the head of the Murim Union, bound to strive for justice, is now the young master of a demonic cult? He thought about it. Then it turns out the techniques the guy was learning in the cave. One of the warriors said that then, if the young lord had completed the training, did that mean they had mastered the demon lord's supreme art? He was horrified. He thought, demon lords? The creator of an art that the guy had trained in for years. The man he mourned and vowed to serve him as a true master belongs to a demonic cult. A demon lord? Grabbing him, the guy started yelling that he didn't. The others tried to calm the young gentleman down. The guy thought that he, young Chaguk, had mastered the supreme art of the demon lord of the Guangmyong cult. Plus, after being reborn into the body of a young master, when he woke up, he realized that it seemed to be just a dream. He looked around and thought it was definitely a dream. Jan Chaguk went to wash his face. But as soon as he looked in the mirror, he realized that it was far from a dream. He didn't understand why he was being punished like this. Why did this happen to him? Dark Palace. The woman asked Miss to relax her face, or she would get wrinkles. It was the princess of the Dark Palace, the second daughter of Dan Jianhak, Dan Yoa. Does the woman think she should be smiling right now? When that bastard came back, the girl started saying it's been 3 years since he left. Why did he decide to come back? She wanted him to die there too. The woman asked her to keep her voice down in case someone hears. She started screaming. Who else could be there but them? No one would dare to overhear. If they did, who cares? She really wants him dead. The woman started telling her that the girl was supposed to be his wife. She shouldn't have said that. She thought that this was how Jehovah would end up alone. The girl began to speak the demon lord's supreme art. Even the head himself didn't manage to wield it. She didn't expect the guy could. The girl heard that he cried and fainted. The nanny said it must be. It didn't go the way he planned. Let her try to understand him without paying attention to others. Yewa asked why should she? He has accomplished nothing and is just using his status as a young master to have fun with other women. The woman said he was handsome. Wouldn't she want to forgive him for everything? Looking at that face, she exhaled, thinking that she couldn't believe she'd thought the same thing a couple years ago. Her naive fantasies had been dashed the first time they'd met. She watched him from the side. As she approached, she asked him if he was the young master. The girl said her name was Dan Yewa. When he heard her name, he asked her if she was his fiancée. Then he said that she didn't look too bad. Holding out his leg, the guy ordered her to massage it for him. The girl didn't immediately understand what he meant. He said he couldn't have her, so don't worry. He said he would massage her, too, after they joined their bodies. He was 15 and she was 14. Did he think the demon lord's supreme art was just another joke? His ancestors gave their lives trying to master those techniques. She said she even wanted to applaud him when the guy decided to lock himself in the corridor of the higher demons. Everyone hated him so much. No one stopped him. The girl said that if he had vowed to master that art, he would have had to give up his life. Why would he crawl out of the cave in tears after 3 years? And she's what they call an ice flower. Why does she have to marry a jerk like him? The girl screamed that she'd rather die. The nanny asked if it was time for Miss to go to Myung's small palace. Who knows, maybe 3 years has changed him. The boy realized that it had been 4 days since he had regained consciousness. Only a few people came to visit him, even though he was a young master. But in the meantime, he's learned a few things. First, the owner of this body is the small Myung cult leader, Ma Chongso. As it turned out, his behavior was not the best. Then he thought that no, his behavior was simply unacceptable. The locals call him the petty lustful spirit. He was strongly beckoned to have fun with women, and also used his status to go unpunished and act more horrible than an evil spirit. The guy hadn't hoped for much since they were demon rings, but come to think of it, he'd gotten the worst-case scenario. And secondly, he figured out why the guy could remain untouched for all the things he'd done. As it turns out, his father is the head of a demonic cult, one of those supreme beings that surpasses even 10 land masters. Demon Ma Taipyeong. Is it a joy to be able to call one of the strongest men on earth his father? Third, he learned that he is the only son of the head, and having that status, the guy is just an empty shell. It is unknown whether the owner of the body was indifferent to everything or just plain stupid, but he lived his life without putting in an ounce of effort. Although he had studied martial techniques, but he wasn't good at them, and his social skills could be called negligible. The small Myung palace was the only thing he had. Hearing the conversation of the bowmen passing by, the guy only sighed. They were discussing whether the young master was now a kite without a string. Since he hadn't managed to fully master the demon lord's supreme art, the chapter wouldn't leave him alone when he returned. They saw Yeoljin as the next head. Then the girls realized that they had to keep their voices down, because someone might hear them. The guy thought he had already heard everything. He shouldn't blame them too much. These are words worth hearing from the body's owner, Ma Kyonso. He pondered the kite without a rope. Even if the guy wasn't ruined by excess chi, he still didn't have long to live. The only thing reassuring at that point is that he's only 19 and it's only been 3 years since his death. Figures that even if he returns to the Murim Alliance, after taking one look at his species, who would even choose to say hello? It would be extremely surprising if he managed to keep his own life story. After spending the last few days like a madman, he didn't have it in him to be angry. It's not like him to worry about what's already happened. The guy realized that right now, he had to accept it. Looking in the mirror, he turned to Ma Chongso, saying that it didn't matter how he had lived before. The guy will live his own way, like young Chaguk. Suddenly, the image in the mirror replied that let him try. It's still a demonic cult, and he's the young master, Ma Kyonso. He'll see if the guy can last as long as young Chaguk in that place. will be watching him. Suddenly, the door opened. Seeing a girl, he asked who she was. With anger in her eyes, the girl asked who she was. The guy realized he shouldn't talk so politely while in this body. Old habits are hard to break. He asked who the hell she was. The girl shouted and asked him if he had forgotten her face already. The lad realized that if they were close enough that this particular one could so easily visit the young lord's chambers, then this was not their first meeting. After looking her over from head to toe, he realized that the girl was wearing normal clothes and comfortable shoes. A young girl who can enter Myung's small palace if she wants to. The guy thought she was his maid. He said he was deep in thought. He said he'd step back. She could get on with her work. The girl yelled out what was he talking about. Young Chagik asked if a mere servant girl was asking him what she should do. Is she not a timid person? Or is she just stupid? He said either way, she's wrong. Let her clean up and get out. That's her job. Furious, she asked did he just call her a mere maid? He realized that he shouldn't prejudge people based only on their work, but the image in the mirror was still repeating that it was a demonic cult. And he, the young master, Ma Chongso, did the guy ask her something wrong? As a host, he's only asking to fulfill his duties. When he turned around, he saw that the girl was crying. The boy wondered if he had been too rough. Right before his eyes, she turned her back to him and walked toward the exit. When she got outside, she slammed the door loudly. Wiping her tears, she thought, do they really want a girl to marry someone like him? She'd rather die. Young Chagik thought that apparently even the servants of this cult are quite impulsive. Suddenly, his stomach made the characteristic sound of hunger. He wondered if he had let her go too quickly. The guy should have ordered her to do something. Ian ordered himself to pull himself together first. He needed to find out the circumstances of things first. Thus, this guy is almost the only one who lives in the entire small Myung palace. Entering one of the rooms, he asked Yultak is there? Seeing the young gentleman, the boy asked what had brought him there at this hour. Young Chagik thought about the fact that he was Ma Chongso's servant and the only person who had visited him in the past 4 days. At present, the hardships are living in this attic. The boy said the gentleman called him by name today. Are the memories coming back? When he came back, he looked a little gloomy, so he was worried. It's because he's lacking negative energy, right? Putting his hand on the gentleman's shoulder, Yultak asked if he had a reservation at the brothel. The guy thought what they say, trash reaches for trash. How could he be so vicious? Pushing him away, the Lord ordered him to stop this nonsense. Let him allow him to ask a few questions, as his memory had not yet fully returned. Placing his hand on the gentleman's forehead, the lad said strangely, there seems to be no fever. Yultak said that the guy talks as if he is a man of a traditional cult. The master immediately pushed his hand away. Young Chagik thought he had noticed. What should he do? Should the guy kill him and get out of there as soon as possible? Yultak said he was joking. The Lord was so surprised. A lad now? Remembers, his behavior was somewhat different. He said he was a busy man, but he had to follow the young master's orders. The boy asked, does he call someone who sleeps in broad daylight busy? Yultak asked what exactly the gentleman wanted to ask him. Suddenly, the boy saw that he was tending flowers. The boy shouted for Mr. Please don't touch them. Ian said that looking at those twisted and soft leaves, one would think that this was nature's way of greeting him. Looking at him, the guy asked if he was a young gentleman. Did he happen to hit his head anywhere? Thinking briefly, the gentleman asked how he had said it earlier. Thinking about it, he said that normally it would have looked like this. Yultak turned into an angry guy who started yelling that fucking piece of spoiled tofu. If he said that again, he'd cut his goddamn tongue into 5 pieces too. The boy asked why the Lord was looking at him like that. Actually, he was one of the worst, but it was normal for a demonic cult representative to express himself harshly. Young Chagik replied that it was fine. He'd better tell him how the cult was organized. Suddenly, his stomach made hunger sounds again. Yultak replied that it was very loud. The guy had told him to get something to eat. He suggested going somewhere to eat and then they could talk. Afterwards, I asked the gentleman if he remembered Myankan restaurant. It's a meat dish with white garlic. It's made from recently caught pigs, cut into pieces, and after scalding, it melts in your mouth. Does he think that's it? After a serving of rice soup with egg yolk and corn from the south, it gets so warm inside. The master immediately started pushing him outside, saying it's time to go since the guy wants it so badly. Suddenly, Yultak said he remembered the restaurant was closed today. He suggested eating somewhere else. The gentleman asked why. The guy said there's a gathering of the Myong cult heirs today. All the children of important clan members will be there. He immediately added that he strongly advised the gentleman not to go there. There was only one thought in his mind: the heirs of the Myong cult, stepping outside and breathing in a full chest of air. The guy thought, what marvelous weather. Already steamed with the gentleman. The guy asked if he was sure he was going to show up there. Ian said yes. Yultak began to ask Mr. Understands that he didn't just advise him not to go there, right? He just asked me to tell him how the Myung cult works. The guy says that the cult consists of 9 palaces. They, in turn, are divided into 2 Myung palaces and 7 outer palaces. The Myung palaces consist of Gwaemyong Palace, where the cult leader resides, and the small Myung Palace, where he resides. The other 7 palaces are currently a threat to Gwaemyong Palace. Jan Chagak asked why. The guy replied that it was because the head wasn't there. No one knows where he is. Because of this, there was a rumor that a new head of the cult had to be chosen. Ma Taepyeong, the head of the demonic cult, suddenly disappeared, leaving only a single note asking not to look for him. It's only natural for wolves to try to become king of a territory when the tiger is gone. The guy replied that the whole young gentleman is spot on. Yultak asked why he was referring to himself in the third person. He replied that it didn't matter. Let the guy keep talking. Yultak asked who will see him as the next head. The guy is incredibly weak, unreasonable, and his actions are shameful. There's nothing beautiful about him except his pretty face. Even he wouldn't choose him. If any dog becomes the next chapter, what happens to the demonic cult? It will become a dog cult. The gentleman replied that he was terribly open in communicating with him. Yultak said it was all the others talking. He is forever his loyal servant, isn't he? Anyway, the guy had heard that the Lord would lose everything if he couldn't master the Demon Lord's supreme art. He seems to be fine. Young Chagak thought that he shouldn't renounce his words so easily, so he would continue to consider the Lord as his master. But a guy shouldn't use techniques without proper necessity. Yultak asked casually, does he know how many people are part of the Myung cult? The master replied that he would guess about 10,000. He replied that no, let him listen to him carefully. If you count the regular ones on the Central Plains, the cult has millions of members. Now it made sense to him why the emperor was fussing. Had he ever seen the government go after a Murim union or a renegade association? All they do is single out Myong and label its members as enemies of the country. Speaking of which, no emperor has ever declared any cults enemies, whether they adhered to those traditional teachings or not. And millions, it's like one big country. It's not just a group of martial artists. Mr. asked, then it turns out that 7 palaces take on the role of 3 ministries and 6 ministers? Then why are they still silent? The guy said it's been 2.5 years since the head disappeared. That's enough time to organize a rebellion. Yultak replied that the rebellion is certainly wanted, but not all the palaces are on the same side. It turns out that the 2 Myung palaces, the 7 side palaces, and the Council of Elders are trying to keep the balance between each other. The guy replied that they were waiting for the Myung cult's heavenly festival, which was held every 2 years, but the appearance of the heir to the head's seat, which was him, would change things. Master asked, but then why are there only 2 people in the small palace? Where are all the others? The boy replied that there were more, but he threw them all out of the door. Jan Chagak asked him. The boy said yes, once because of his ugly appearance, once because he was too thin. Did he ask if he could tell him more? The boy realized what a short-sighted man he was. But now he realizes more. There are many who want to rule there. The situation is peaceful at the moment. Everything is in balance. It was still dangerous. If anything outweighed it, there would be a great war. And after that, the spears could be pointed at the central plain. Yultak said he would do it again. The gentleman would gain nothing from being there. Ordering him to shut up, the boy said he'd just let him take him there. The master understood his worries. They would look down on him. He also has a soft side to the master. However, he has always been taught to meet injustice face to face. Thinking succinctly and acting quickly, if he's at an impasse, there's only one thing left to do. He needs to be changed direction or all barriers will be destroyed. And the guy will do it not as a cult member, but as a man following the path of justice. Young Chagak, the master said that they should all be about the same age, so there should be no problems. The boy told him that it was not what he thought. Young Chagak said that everything was fine. Now that he had left his palace, he had the sole and exclusive right to send his greetings to everyone. Myong cult, Myonkan restaurant. A man asked why they couldn't come in. The guard said that all the tables were occupied, so let them leave. He asked what that meant, because he could clearly see that there were empty seats inside. The man replied that those seats were reserved. His friends suggested he leave. They said this place is under the control of the palaces. Even the guards are strong martial artists. Suddenly, a guard shouted, "Fortune of the East, second son of the Poison Palace, leader of the Steel Poison Squadron." Everyone realized that today was the day to choose the heir to the Myung cult. The second daughter of the Sword Palace, Ice Flower Danyewa, appeared in front of them. They realized that this was the miss who was the most beautiful among all the cults and associations. People didn't understand why she was there today. One of them said he'd heard she was a stranger to such events. The men looked at her with their mouths open. They said that it looked like the rumors were true. She was really beautiful. The girl thought about the fact that the young master was not the only man in the Myong cult. She would end this marriage if she became betrothed to someone like him. As she entered the room, she looked at everyone in turn. One had an overly elongated face, the other looked weak, and the third guy's stare made her feel uncomfortable. Heading for the stairs, the girl thought it would be better to go up to the second floor and stay there. Chun Amu shouted that the ice flower had come to meet the heir. Today they are celebrating the day, and those who didn't show up would soon regret it. The guy said that who knows, he might get lucky that night. He was the second son of the head of the merchant palace, Chun Amu. He said that the name Ice Flower suited the girl. After greeting her, Chun Amu introduced himself. The girl realized that he was sucking up, but at least this guy looked the most status among all of them. It's a gathering of the Myung cult's heirs, but she doesn't see any representatives from outside palaces or the Council of Elders there. She thought maybe a Yuljin would come. He asked what on earth had brought the ice flower there. Had she guessed that he would be there too? Looking at him, the girl realized that he obviously didn't think before he said anything. She didn't understand how he had so many teeth. Suddenly, she heard that the only son of the Myung cult head, small palace head Ma Chongso, had also come. The girl thought, why did that creep show up there too? At the restaurant, the guy told the young gentleman that he had thought again and still didn't think it was the right decision. He suggested he go back. Why is he standing there? Tell him to turn around quickly. Without thinking, the gentleman pushed him forward. The boy started yelling at him to wait. As soon as the guard saw him, he asked, "Did Yultak come to the meeting?" The boy replied that they had not seen each other for a long time. The guard wanted to call out his name, but the guy covered his mouth with his hands and said he wasn't the one who came. Looking at him, the man asked if it wasn't him. Then who was it? He saw that it was the head of the small palace, Myung. He immediately asked why he was there. Is he trying to do something again? One of the men rose from his seat and said he would go, then wished everyone a safe journey home. The guy thought that regular people didn't overlook the demonic cult. He thought they were all crazy, but that opinion was only because of him. Looking at the guards, the Lord said to let him report for duty. Isn't that his duty? The man immediately shouted that the only son of the cult leader Myung men. Let them meet Ma Chongso, the head of the small palace. I immediately rose from my seats and greeted the gentleman. Looking through the crowd, he saw the girl run out the back door. Turning to the lad, he asked him to be alone. Yultak immediately asked the young gentleman where he was going, running away. The girl didn't understand why the hell he was there. Turning around, she asked why he was following her. Seeing him, the girl was frightened. She tried to attack, but suddenly her legs got tangled and the girl started falling. He caught her in time. The boy thought this is what it means to be in a demonic cult. Whether he was an errand boy or an employee of the Myong Palace, you couldn't find someone there who didn't know martial arts. Anyway, this girl is very unpredictable. Looking at him, she asked the guy to let her go. He realized that keeping his hand on the girl's waist for too long was unacceptable. As soon as the guy let go of her, she immediately fell. She shouted that he had lost his mind. The master replied that it was an accident. She had seen it herself. Jan Chagak replied that he thought the girl would fall, but let go because he thought it was very rude of him to hold her by the waist for so long. Moving closer to the girl, he asked her if she was okay. Her face showed that she was surprised. The guy realized that it looked like he was being too polite again. He started to say that if she wanted to continue being his maid, she should take care of the hands that cleaned his room. The girl started yelling. Is he doing it again? Young Chagak realized that even though it is a demonic cult, and her harshness in speaking out is like a wild cat, he must try to correct this behavior. The gentleman replied that she could say whatever she wanted, but looking at such a nasty person, one can say that she will get herself into trouble wherever she goes. He realized that the demon cult was shrouded in darkness, so let her stay in the small palace. That way the guy could protect her while being close to her. Dan Yewa asked, should he be worried about her? Doesn't the guy know what kind of meeting is going on tonight? He said it's the Myung heirs meeting, so he knows. But he's still in there? If he doesn't want to cause more trouble, he can go back to his little palace. Jan Chagak asked if a man is constantly running away from problems, how will he be able to complete anything? She doesn't have to worry about him at all. The girl asked him what he thought, that she was worried about him. The guy replied that she seemed worried about him. But it's okay, he's fine. After yelling that she wasn't worried about him, the girl turned around and started to run away. The guy thought she was always so contradictory in expressing her emotions. Or was she just inexperienced? Speaking of which, he wonders if she's okay. He hopes this girl isn't too upset with him. Looking up into the sky, he thought to let Young So wait for him as his brother. The guy promises to return. Dan Yewa didn't understand why he was acting and talking as if he had become a good person. Surely the guy hadn't hit his head? The girl immediately pictured him in front of her eyes. Waving her hands, she began to shout for him not to smile at her. She was angry with him. Looking at the restaurant, the only question in her mind was why had he come after all? Was the word on his mind? Yultak asked the gentleman where he had gone. The guy replied that he was in the restroom. The guy asked so suddenly. The gentleman replied that he knows, it can't be controlled. It's time to go now. Chun Amu began to say what he heard. He was in the 10,000 Demons corridor. He wondered if the guy had made any progress in learning the martial art. He's surprised they decided to visit such a humble place. If the guys came for the women and excitement, don't you think they'd be better suited to the outskirts of the slums? Yultak replied that the man should watch his tongue. The man replied that the guy keeps grabbing for a holy life preserver. That's the reason his family abandoned him. Doesn't he realize that? Isn't the guy ashamed of embarrassing his family like that? Seeing his dish, the gentleman said it looked good, the oily sheen pleasing to his eye. Suddenly, the boy turned to the gentleman. Young Chagak asked if he was interrupting him. After apologizing, said the guy could continue his conversation. Chun Amu said he looked at them and realized that someone needed to see a doctor. He asked if he could get a doctor. Seeing the questioning look on the guy's face, he went on to say that they were now in a bad mood because someone as modest in stature as him was saying something like that. Turning to his subordinate, the gentleman asked who it was. The guy said his name is Chun Amu. He is the son of the head of the merchant palace. The guy's no better than a yard dog. The lord had the trade palace on his mind. He should give him a good welcome. The gentleman asked, does this restaurant really serve food even to dogs? Cracking his chair, he looked at the young gentleman and asked the guy, doesn't he know what tact is? Or is he out of his mind? Much has changed since the lord left to study martial arts in the cave. Is he sure he can behave like that in a place like this? The master thought he wasn't wrong. Ma Chongso was irritable and always relied on his father, and he didn't have that support now. The fact that this type is acting like a provocateur suggests that he is prepared for his return. What's the guy's power of influence? He asked for details about it. Yultak replied that if they are talking about a strict hierarchy, he has the second highest position of Myung, and within reason a guy can personally punish others right on the spot. Also has the right to use the armed forces of the small palace. Young Chagak thought that means he occupies a place between the supreme judge and the emperor. A lord cannot, for example, order someone to be beheaded. Only the emperor has the right to do that, so he could safely teach the fool a lesson. Yultak asked the young master, he's not really going to kill him. They will have a lot of problems later. The master replied that he heard him perfectly well. Let him go back. He said he would punish him. He would kill him. The guy shouted that right. That dumbass should get what he deserves. The one with the big mouth like a hippopotamus jaw and the bulging eyes like a fish. The master saw him grab the cup in his hands and swing it. He thought that, judging from the tension of his muscles and the angle of his arm, He was going to throw it to his left to scare him. So he doesn't want to seriously hurt him because he'll have to answer for it. The Lord grabbed Yultak and pulled him sharply to himself, thus covering himself from being hit by the cup. Turning to Chun Am, the gentleman asked him if the merchant palace was making an attempt on him. The boy replied that it was nonsense. The master asked how else. He had just tried to kill him, hadn't he? If his servant hadn't saved him, the master would have died. Or instead, was he targeting the young master in his place? The boy shouted that absurdity. It was only a drinking cup. Looking at his servant, the young master asked how he was feeling. The boy replied, "Can't he see he's in a hell of a lot of pain?" The gentleman said that as he sees it, the boy is on the verge of death. The evidence is ample. Should he call and tell the Council of Elders about this situation? Or would it be better to visit the head of the merchant palace right away? Just as the gentleman thought. Children of prestigious palaces fear not the anger of the public, but the anger of their parents. He doesn't know how the ignorant young lord would react to this, but the boy is different. Looking at the others, the gentleman asked if they were also in cahoots with him. The boys replied that they were not. They had just come for dinner. One of them said that then they were in a hurry to go somewhere, then asked if they could go. The young gentleman replied that of course. Looking at Chun Ama, the lord asked why he was still standing there. If he wants to kill him, let him do it quickly. This is his last chance. Smirking, the gentleman said he wished success for the trading house. In that case, through anger and hatred, the boy asked to be forgiven. The master asked forgive him for what? He said he was out of line. The guy said Chun Amu hurt a man, and that's all he could say? Amu shouted that it was because the Lord was using him as a living. Young Chagak replied that if he thought he could hide behind his father's name, let him not try. Even if thousands bow before him, the time is coming when their blood and tears will become daggers that will be repaid into his vicious heart. Does the Lord think he's lying? He, Ma Chongso, will be his retribution. The boy immediately fell to his knees and apologized, saying he had committed a grave sin. He only asked not to go to his father. The Lord replied that he should shut up and go to his palace immediately. He will tell them that he will visit them soon. No one understood what was going on. The head of a small palace declaring war on a merchant palace? They understood that usually the young lord used his father's name more than anyone else. The guy thought of the 7 side palaces along with the Council of Elders. One by one, he would come to each one. One of the 7 side palaces, a trading house. The head of the trading house is Zhang Seiman. Turning to his father, the boy told him that the head of the small palace was only trying to scare them. The man shouted, "Does the boy even realize what he's done?" Chun Am wondered if the Lord would be able to do anything to them. He wouldn't understand why his father was so angry. The man ordered him to shut his mouth. No matter how low and stupid he was still the head of the small palace. The guy said it was a misunderstanding. He hoped the Lord had lost his fighting ability due to overload. But when he saw him, he thought a tiger had approached him. The man yelled, "How dare his son make excuses? He doesn't want to see his face. Let him leave to the demon corridors and not return until he himself allows it." He immediately asked his father if that was too harsh. What about his training? The man asked him to shut up. Does he think he can't punish him for such behavior? It had been 2 years since the head of the Myong cult, Ma Taipyung, had disappeared. According to the opinion of the Council of Elders and the 7 outside palaces, it was decided to choose a new head. A new sun is destined to rise during the festival in honor of the Feast of Heaven. In any case, the young head of the small palace had returned after completing his secluded practice. If they bring up the issue of choosing a new cult leader, he will take over. As long as there is no head, the young master stands above everyone else in terms of his status, despite everything. At this moment, the head of the small palace is like a powder keg, ready to explode at any moment. They need more time to observe and take action. His son is an idiot, stirring up a hornet's nest. Turning to the gentleman, the man asked if he had called him. This is the captain of the Gold Cavalry Squadron, Chong Byron. The man asked how he thought the head of the small palace did it. Understanding their current situation, Zhang replied that he was a man of his equal behavior. It's hard to think about what his motives are. The Lord added, what's still strange is that the guy was able to handle his son so easily. Why would he call this ignoramus a tiger? Chong Byron replied that young Master Chun Amu was known for his modesty. The young head was an ordinary martial artist at his not-so-great best. Even if he isn't stupid, there's no need to worry so much. Turning to the master, Zhang Byron said that this was their chance. He added that it was a great opportunity. Looking at him, Zhang Salmon asked why the man thought so. He said that since all powers are equal, the master is the grain on the scale. Either he would be on their side or they would kill him. That was the boundary dimension of the situation. The man asked, isn't that what he was talking about? In these times, a charge of sedition could finish them all off. If someone else from outside the palace kills him, they can frame them, after which they will meet their death. Zhang Byron replied that that's why he called it a chance. The head of the small palace is impulsive and impetuous. If they greet and gift him well, they can earn his trust. The man asked if he wanted to defend the young master. Zhang replied that yes, by protecting him they could earn his favor. Everything was coming to a point where a trading house could run a Myung cult. The head replied that it was fine. That is, he meant to become the cult's ruler until the head returned. If, of course, he returns. He ordered the man to bring the sacred sword of demonic flame. Chong replied that it was one of the 5 divine treasures of the cult. The gentleman replied that they wouldn't do anything with it. Then he decided that he would bring it himself. To catch big fish, they must use big bait. The young gentleman realized that they would think that the trouble in the restaurant was a rash move. They would be busy calculating their next moves. If he must live the rest of his life in this body, it would be better for him to run the demonic cult himself and bring peace to the Central Plains. The trade palace is ideal as a first goal. Economic support is needed to implement the plans. The current problem for him is the lack of sufficient strength. He won't be able to topple mountains on his own. The guy has to find people who aren't part of anyone's army. The only warrior under the roof of Myung's small palace is. Entering the young gentleman's resting place, Yoltak asked how he could sleep after what had happened. He replied that he was meditating, not sleeping. The lad asked the question again, since when has he been doing this? Very good timing on the part of the gentleman, I might add. Rather have her go to the second naked house and say it was all a joke. They could be in big trouble. The boy replied that he was dead serious. Did Yoltak think the master was joking? He asked if the master wanted to be locked in the corridors again. Why piss off 7 outside palaces when the head of the cult is absent? The lord replied that the guy had crippled him. He would take care of his men. Yoltak shouted that it was the master who pushed him. Jan Shagak replied that he should not thank him. More importantly right now, could the guy bring the records that spelled out the entire hierarchy of the Myung cult? Yoltak asked the records. Does he mean the hierarchical records of the Myung cult? The guy could certainly get them, but did he need them right away? Jan Shagak answered that yes, right now. He needs to know who he can turn to in order to fill the small palace with the people he needs. Looking at the boy, the gentleman asked him what he was waiting for. Nudging him, he began to say that he would escort him out. Yoltak kept trying to find out what he wanted to fill. Jan Shagak replied that he wants to fill the palace houses. There are 11 empty houses in the palace, not counting him. The boy asked if the lord had eaten something wrong. He said it's too quiet, even though it's where the young master lives. And he said he was bored too, right? Yoltak started shouting that the gentleman had done enough yesterday, and now he wanted to do this too? Is this his way of throwing a tantrum? Jan Shagak replied that he would certainly prefer that others roll. Turning to the young gentleman, the lad replied that this was not something that should be taken so lightly. They might not consider Chun Amu, but if he implicated the people of the small palace, the 7 outside palaces and the Council of Elders would not leave him alone. Turning to the boy, the gentleman asked who he was. Yoltak asked, does it matter now? When he wants to make a buffoonery again. Jan replied that he would ask him again. Jan Shagak asked the boy again who he was. Yoltak replied that he was the head of the small palace. Then the question was repeated. Does the head need anything else? The boy realized what was going on. Pointing to his belongings, he ordered the gentleman to change his clothes. They don't need any extra attention in the city. After looking at the things, Jan Shagak asked the boy, only have these clothes? Yoltak replied that he liked black. Walking down the street, the gentleman asked, is this the night market? Yoltak said no. Then the gentleman asked if he knew where they were. Didn't he? It's 100,000 great mountains. He certainly didn't count himself, but the peaks are truly an infinite number. The cult members live on only 7 of them. Gwaemyong Palace and the smaller Myong Palace are located on the largest peak, the Peak of the Sun, greedily receiving a good portion of the sun's rays. Then comes the peak of the moon, flame, waters, wood, steel, and earth. The peak of the sun has everything except what is not on it. The head is content with all that is necessary. But for the other palaces, not all is so happy. A lot of people have to go to the market there at the top of the waters. And how does it work there? Some come in the evening, some at night, some in the morning. So the market is open all the time. The Lord realized that he had no idea that cultists had to go through such a thing. It must be difficult, especially for those who are not skilled in martial arts. He asked, hadn't you thought of going down the mountain to buy something? Yultak asked to go down from the peaks. If they go down, they will be attacked by the Renegade Alliance, the Murim Alliance, and the Emperor himself. How can they go down? That's because a demonic cult has affected the Central Plains several times over. All they have to do is stop it. Yultak replied that he meant they might want to come down. But the Emperor had counted the demonic cult as enemies without any justification. They were just fighting to survive. After apologizing, the gentleman asked the guy didn't think their actions were too barbaric to be considered self-defense. Turning to the young master, the lad said he shouldn't talk like that. The guy said the whole world had heard about the shame of the lusty little demon. Whose side is he on? Thinks now that he's a young lord of a demonic cult. Speaking of which, the guy forgot about it. But having a nickname stuck to his personality is a nasty problem. Even if he finds someone, will people want to follow him? Going up the stairs, the gentleman asked if they had arrived yet. Yultak replied that they were almost there. In any case, how could his servant not be tired of this? Yultak told the young master that they had come. It was there. It was the Gwanmyong Library. The guy said this place is known to those who listen to gossip. It's as good as a mystical palace. Once inside, they saw an old man. Yultak asked him if there was anything to see today. The old man immediately asked where they had come from. The boy replied that there was light, but it was very dim. The old man would ruin his eyesight if he read like that. As soon as he saw the gentleman, he immediately replied that he didn't know if there was anything to see. Yultak replied that there must be something. Then he asked how things were at the market. The old man replied that there were different markets there. Which one were they talking about? The guy replied that they were talking about that one. Of course. The gentleman thought, what is this meaningless conversation? Glaring at them, the old man asked them to wait, then kicked them outside the library. Yultak started yelling, why did he put them out the door? Doesn't the little glow know? They came from over there. After opening a passage in the floor, the old man went down there. He came to the door and said that they seemed to have come from the small palace of Myong. Then he asked what they should do. A voice outside the door asked if they had come in person. The old man replied that he had put on a robe to hide himself, but the beauty of his face could not be hidden. It is undoubtedly a young gentleman. He asked what could have happened at the Celestial Demon Gallery, first trashing the restaurant, now showing up at his place. The old man replied that his aura was different from before, but he had always been someone whose actions were hard to predict. The man added that it was neither the Merchant Palace nor Guanying Palace, but himself. The old man replied that he had asked for a list of names. The man asked if he wanted the hierarchical records of the Murim Union or unrelated unions. He replied that no, the young master wanted to see the records of the Myung cult's records. The man replied that it was even harder to understand. The head of the small palace wants to see the records of the Myung cult. The old man asked what they should do. He replied that he had met him himself. The old man immediately started asking questions. Would he meet him himself? Would the man be all right? The one replied that he was nicknamed the Problem Bastard. Even if he had eyes, he wouldn't be able to recognize him. The old man replied that in any case, if he recognized him. The man replied that then it would be even better. If he does turn out to be capable of something, they will find it in their favor. The head of the small palace is on the verge of his rotten life. The boys kept standing and waiting outside as suddenly the door to the library opened. Yultak asked the old man if he'd figured it out after all. Why did you do it then? The old man silently continued down the stairs. The guy started to say it was his first time there. Did they manage to hide such a place? Standing in front of the door, he said the guests had arrived. As soon as the voice ordered them in, the door opened immediately. Once inside, the boys noticed a lot of painted portraits around. Yultak asked what they were. The man replied that it was just the old man's little works. After greeting the young master, he bowed. Jan Shagak hadn't said anything yet, but he already recognized him. The old man replied that you learn these things with age. As the guy sees, he can't stand on his own. Apologizes that he can only greet in this way. Jan Chagak asks the old man made this chair himself. The man replied that it was called a wheelchair. There was nothing in his abilities that could be praised. The guy replied that the secret room was located under what was called the library, and a man who calls himself a crippled old master but is actually more great. How can that not be surprising? The guy started saying he was a great artist. Looking at the portraits, he realized it was a list. Must be a list of outstanding Murim fighters. Not the Orthodox connections, the Murim alliance, the Emperor's forces. They captured each of the outstanding fighters who had reached the highest stage. The guy's mind was full of questions. Who is he? He can't believe it. The mysterious monk Sorim, the 7 disciples of Wu Tang, the cloud dragon of the void. Suddenly, in one of the portraits, the boy saw his father. The old man asked if he recognized someone. He replied that there were people from the Murim Union on the other side. The guy replied that they were hard cases run by the library. Who is the old man? The man replied that he is an old man who collects and spreads rumors. The guy added that this is not something an ordinary old man can handle. If it gets out, there will be bloodshed. The old man replied that that was why he was hiding there. Jan Chagak said just because he has a roof doesn't mean there's no sun. If evil needs information, will he tell the same? An old man shouldn't be doing this just for his own pleasure. The man asked the young lord worried about the central plane. He would make an awfully good ruler. Yultak called him an old geezer, then asked, does he want to make up right there? Why does the old man suddenly think he can talk like that? The man replied that how could he be afraid of the thought of losing his life when he was held by such things? In any case, if he died, no one would be able to leave. As soon as he said those words, the door closed immediately. Young Chagak replied that it sounded as if he wanted to kill him, so the master wouldn't get out. The old man asked how could he be capable of doing that? The man simply hoped that they would heed his advice. The master replied that he could pretend, go out and come back with more warriors, to which the old man replied that by then, he would be gone. The guy replied how much confidence he had in him. The old man realized that this was how he would stay alive. Jan Chagak told them it was idle talk. Why did they call him? They could have given him a leaf upstairs. The old man replied that he had come himself. So why did the young master need the Mayan cult? The guy realized he's good at reading. An unconvincing lie won't solve anything. He replied that he wanted the martial artists to live in the small palace. The old man interjected at the small palace of Mayankan. Is that why the master stopped at Mayankan restaurant? He didn't find any capable people. The guy replied that they had cozy homes. They didn't need it. He hoped to gather those who did not belong to any associations. The old man was puzzled, and then asked the boy if he meant to increase his influence. Jan Chagak replied that he just wanted to fill the empty rooms. With a smirk, the man inquired, does the gentleman not know what times are like now? Or does he look down on them? The lad replied that if he suffers, whether he goes or stays in the palace, he has no reason to do nothing. Turning to him, the man said that this path could lead him to death. Looking at the old man, the gentleman asked if he really thought so. Without thinking, he asked him his name. The old man replied that his last name was Tong, and his first name was Jagal. Only one name immediately popped into the boy's head, Jagalton. He began to reminisce about everyday life from the past. The man asked why he should not give up martial arts and go to Gukshagam with him. The guy replied that he shouldn't let Sunbei talk nonsense. He'd better give him the Black Dragon aquaculture plan. He doesn't have much time. The Ark is calling. The man replied with manners. Let him keep it. Avoid murder if possible. The guy told him to stop picking on him. Let him go get some air. And why are there no windows? The man replied that asking too many questions could cost him his life. A man of the Jagalton secret alliance, unrivaled in intellect. He has been dubbed the rebirth of the first ancestor, a man who was briefly called the first brain of the central part of the world because of the publication of the white paper of the secret union of Murim. He was his Sunbei, the one who cared for him the most when he first joined the Murim alliance. They had been friends for a long time. It was fun to study martial arts together. Suddenly, the guy immediately remembered the scar on his arm. When he looked at the old man's hand, he saw it. Then he wondered if it was really his scar. He didn't understand why Sunbei was on a 1,000-year-old mountain in Gwangmyeong Library, and even in a secret room. The guy said he couldn't believe it. If he's a Jagalton, he must be in his 40s. Puzzled, The man asked the young gentleman, does the young gentleman know him? Now he wondered if the young gentleman was the real young gentleman. The guy answered once in his own words. Unnecessary questions could cost him his life. The old man couldn't believe his ears. He said he had been disrespectful and then apologized. Jan Chagak then asked why he was there. The old man replied that no one knows who will be there and where he will go. He is there because his destiny took him there. Yultak asked the young gentleman if he knew him. The boy replied that he didn't. Didn't he bring him there? The lad replied that yes, but this was the first time he had seen him. He is a Jagalton. Isn't that a faction? The young gentleman replied that it was impossible. Does he think he's the only one with the last name Jagalton? The guy immediately replied that if it was a faction, they would have split long ago. Asked if he could ask him something? Why did the young gentleman go there? If he didn't know, he wouldn't have come. The 7 outside palaces, the Elder Council, and Gwanmyong Palace began to follow him. They even declared war on the merchant court. The further a guy stays there, the more changes. Young Chagak thought sitting there alone for a long time is definitely Sunbae. He replied that he was watching them, not the other way around. As soon as the old man pulled the rope, a huge cloth opened up. The boys realized that it was a Myung cult sheet. Jagalton said that originally, only 2 words were written on the sheet about the young gentleman. Did the boy know which ones? Those were Guan Cha's words, which meant man is crazy. Yultak said just let him look at him. He'll break every bone in his body. Then asked the man finished talking? How dare he joke in front of the young master? Turning to the boy, the young gentleman asked him to fetch him some water. His throat was dry, so let him go and fetch a bucket of water. After he sent his assistant to fetch water, turning to the old man, the guy said let him continue. The man replied that after their visit, you have to rewrite the sheet. The old man thought he knew everything. But now, he thought he couldn't stay there forever. The boy asked why all of a sudden. The man answered what he had been told. The gentleman was foolish and untalented, but as clever as anyone. Though he was a lunatic, he was a gentleman. Can't you see that? If he's now thinking about why the old man mentioned treason in the 7 side palaces, it's to protect himself. And about the trading palace, he needs wealth, not their power. Plus, if he didn't find them right away, it makes the situation more dangerous. The reason the guy went there, he probably wants to take that spot. Pointing to the cult leader's seat, the old man asked the reason he had come there. Wasn't that what he wanted? Lowering his head, the young lord asked what next? If he becomes the head, he will burn that place down. The old man replied that if the lord was going to be head, he would need help. The servants, the council of elders, or the old man. The boy replied that there was no need to worry about it. The old man added that having only a high status could only dream about it. Careful hope can be extinguished by even a little wind. The master asked that if he shook his hand, would he be able to climb up there? Holding out his hand, the old man said 50%. Jan Chagak replied that it wouldn't work even if he flipped a copper coin. I guess I'll have to do it on my own, won't I? The man replied that it wouldn't be worth it. The guy said it sounds like it wouldn't be worth dreaming about. The old man added that he was just telling him reality. Exhaling, the boy apologized. Jagalton didn't know what he was talking about. The young gentleman replied that he wasn't going to climb up there. The man asked would he really do this to save his life? The gentleman replied that the centuries-old mountain looked conquerable, but it was only a small corner of the northwest. But if you don't look from the outside and only look from the inside, it's just their greed. Even if you climb up, it only looks like a tiger. Instead, the guy will change it. The old man was surprised. After all, he doesn't want to become the head, but to change a demonic cult? He said he thought it was arrogant. Does he think he can hold his own? It's not solved by cutting down a tree. The gentleman replied that it was all the same. He would climb to the top, planting flowers or climbing with his help. What's the difference? Jagalton is clear that the gentleman is not insane, but a fantasizer. Now a man without conditions can change the religion of the cult. It's a demonic cult that worships magic, with modest strength in the martial arts. What a rude thing to say. Jagalton told the gentleman he must buy a share. Let him take his hand. The old man will take the responsibility of making the lad the head. It's better than falling into the hands of scoundrels. I mean, it's not like we don't have to sacrifice anything. The old man added that he would make his life easier. All the gentleman had to do was to give his rights to him, and then he could live as he pleased. Young Chagak wondered Sunbae had such a future. How could he fall like that? Does he really want to become the temporary ruler? Where did Zhangduan's spirit disappear to? If he's forgotten who the guy is, let him find out. The young master asked why the old man was so sure it wouldn't work. He would change the demonic cult with his own hands. The old man struggles with empty desires, blocking his path. Then he strangles him. Jagalton fell on his knees. The master said that limited to just this corner, belonging to no other place, reasoning about the world as rude and arrogant. The old man saw that the guy got his power from the cult leader. He asked, but why does he want to change it? After all, there's only one way to get to the throne. The young master replied that the current magical religion is like an abyss. They push each other into the pain and pity they have created, not even able to free themselves. The old man replied that the young gentleman of the cult would not have known such a thing. Wasn't he doing the same thing? The boy replied that that was why he was the heir to the cult leader. Jagalton started laughing. He said it was so funny. The heir who received the devil's heavenly power changes magic. The master wondered if he was crazy or just tired. The old man began to beg him to give him a chance. If he survived, what kind of fear would that cause him? He asked to be spared. The young gentleman asked why he should do so. The old man replied that he had an illegal case. Jagalton says standing in front of him, in his way. Though his body looks like that, he's sure the Lord will be able to give him some cumbersome orders. How all of a sudden, he questioned if the young master knew who the Howmen were. There was a look of bewilderment in the boy's eyes. He thought that, of course, who doesn't know them? It's a .com organization created by people working in the lower classes. They lacked solidarity, but in terms of information, openness was known to be superior. He didn't understand how Sunbei knew. Taking out a plaque of gold, the old man said he was a 19th generation Hamuju. The boy thought he was right. The young master said that everyone had been deceived. Haomunju lived hiding on a mountain. The old man replied that this must have been the reason for his progress in attaining the power of a heavenly demon. The boy asked if that meant they had to trust each other now. He asked what the old man wanted. The man asked him to promise him only one thing. There is a military gentleman in the Murim Alliance. Let him give it to him later. The young master thought he had imprisoned Sunbei in this place. He wondered why Sunbei had changed so much. What was the reason? If he has a knife under his heart, he must be the most intimidating in the Murim Alliance. The boy knew it was dangerous to leave him alive. The old man said it didn't matter what the Lord was thinking right now. It was a pity that the plan had changed, but nothing would stay the same if he was the heir. The young gentleman replied that much has changed. The old man asked, does he want him on his side? The boy replied that if he followed him, he would have to try harder. Jagalton replied that before that, whoever he was, engineer or student, would first unify it. If he put it all in, the die would not be able to close his eyes in peace. The young master replied that he was mad. Let the old man get used to it. Then he asked him if he needed only him. The old man replied that he was an invalid. It would be better if the gentleman brought him to him. The boy replied that he thought it was too much for the faction. The old man told the Lord that he was more suited to the Murim Alliance than to the demon cult. Turning to the old man, the gentleman asked what should he do now. He replied that for starters, let him pick it up. He was uncomfortable. Let him think of it as a struggle for life. He began to tell me that the current demon cult was no different than an active volcano. From the 7 side palaces to the Elder Council, they are quite strong like never before. The master said that it means that there are 2 candidates for the mountaintop guide. The old man replied that it is true, so the appearance of the young master is a change for them. If he rejects the head, the power will be taken by the minor heir. Whereas, rejecting the head of the small palace will be a great burden. Looking at the gentleman, the old man asked if he was dissatisfied with anything. The boy clarified why he was asking. The man replied that he usually only referred to Myung's cult as demonic. The boy realized that it was too early to reveal his identity. He told the old man to let him continue. Jagalton said that even if a young master had reached the power of a heavenly devil, one could destroy the demonic spirit, but one could not possess it. This was originally created to win the heart of the head. He will give to this young master. The old man said that one of them is the doctrine of the cult secretary Myung. There are several copies of the original, another book, a continuation of the cult. Looking in, the boy saw that it was a mask. The old man told him that the roots of the Myung cult of the West It was said that a demon god created an evil dragon, after which the hero killed it. It was the mask that the hero was wearing. Looking at it, the old man said that it looked like an ordinary mask, but if he put it on, he would be surrounded by a sea of blood. It was made in such a way that no one would recognize him. In the Mayan cult, it was used by 5 gods who were known for generations as heavenly demons. They are scattered all over the world and are unknown. One is known to be there, and it is called the Holy Fire. Let him come down as far as he can. When they find out that the Lord has conquered the power of the heavenly demon, 50% of the Mayan cult, he'll have to deal with it on his own. Exactly that much has been lost in legitimacy. This is the consent of the people to the authorities, their voluntary recognition of their right to make binding decisions. The guy realized that thinking about the Murim alliance, his head was exploding. If the monk and the elite monks met in a closed place, it would be a battle that both sides would lose without benefit. The old man said that in any case, there was no need to worry too much. Let him convince half the palaces and the council of elders before the selection of an heir begins. For months to go, let him be careful. The Lord must approach them one by one. There will also be those who will get ahead of him. For example, Wangwi Palace, where the power of information is strong but not powerful enough. Also, his reputation isn't particularly good. The master himself knows, doesn't he? The boy replied that if he was talking about the past, he was sorry. Does Jagalton know? Everybody only knows Psycho. So he needs to show the new him. The power has increased, which means that people are in danger if they continue to live there. On the contrary, the undue pressure of the 7 outside palaces and the council of elders had intensified. The old man asked how to help them. Let him go outside and look around. And then, see those who can change their lives with small things. He said he'd go undercover. Then he asked if the gentleman could do it. Lowering his eyes, he said he thought so. The master replied that he could. He would do it. Jan Chagak asked if it was possible. The old man replied, doesn't he want to see his power? They have unusual qualities, but they go around and around because they can't blend. He told me that the houses in the small palace are empty. Only 10 seats left. Is that not enough? The old man asked if the place was not 11. The young gentleman replied that it had just gotten an owner. He asked such a shabby place like the small palace. The guy still enjoys his luxury. The master replied that now the old man had become sarcastic. Pulling the cloth, he said let him look over there first. Yulteshchik, they'll start with him. At that moment, an old man came in with Yultak. Seeing the man's portrait, the guy said he knew him. He was bad. He said he was doing well, and then he lost his wife and drank poison. So he has a bad reputation. Jagalton answered that was correct. In Gwaemyang Palace, he was the head of security for the head of the cult leader, a former creditor in Gwaemyang Palace. The young gentleman replied that right away. No co-workers needed. Turning to his assistant, he said it was time to leave. Yultak asked now. The young master replied that he had another purpose. In Subban, outside the marketplace, there is a valley below the waterfall where low-class people live. The water flowing there looks like the tears of those people, so it was called Byragal. It's obvious who might have gone there. Those who lost their fortunes in gambling. Someone who's drunk because they have no family. Those with nowhere else to go. No one paid any attention to them. There was nothing to charge them and nothing to make them repent. Because of this, their lives are devoted day in and day out to the usual routine in a musty house. Determined until a few days ago, a boy asked his mom if he could go home because he felt dizzy. The woman replied that he should keep quiet for a while. She told me that an important man was coming today. If he wants to live, he must be patient. The man asked, who's the one who decided to come? Does he want them all to die so he can walk over their bodies? He was told to watch his tongue, for it would be a young master. They saw him coming. He shouted to everyone on their knees. If they don't want to die, don't make eye contact and fall on your knees. Yultak told the gentleman to see how many people had gathered to greet him. Then he asked if there was a local patrol there, too. The man greeted the young lord, saying that he had come from far away to their musty valley. Their head Changchun exhales. All of them shouted praise to the young lord of the demon cult. Looking at them, he realized that this praise was only for the king. There are plenty of things to get rid of. Looking at the man, the young gentleman asked him if he was hot. He replied that of course not. Could anyone be hot? Seeing that the man was packing quickly, Yultak asked if he would escort them out. The man said yes, let him follow him. Kneeling before the Lord, he asked, were they hard to reach? Why did they suddenly decide to visit this place? Yoltak replied to the head, does the young master of the Mayang cult need a reason to look at people's lives? He said he was right. Then he said he was so embarrassed in front of them, he didn't even have anything to offer them. Yoltak said they have a market nearby, but it's still worse than in the suburbs. The head replied that as it is known to be a very poor place. Looking at the large field of flowers, the young gentleman asked, were those flowers already there? The head apologized and told him that he didn't really know those places. The young gentleman replied that he understood. He could go. He said then if they needed anything, they could call him anytime. In the meantime, he'll go. Yoltak told the young master that the valley was small. He would find him quickly, wouldn't he? Janchagik asked him if he thought it was strange. The boy asked what he was talking about. Mr. said it feels like something is missing. Yoltak replied that the believers look open. The flowers and the river are beautiful. What else? The boy replied that nothing. There is no sign of agriculture in the place where people live. Yoltak asked, does he not go to the market to buy food? Even on a centuries-old mountain, farming is not easy. The gentleman replied that there is a river and it is quite warm. Due to the low location of the valley, it is quite a good place for farming. Besides, do they have to go up to market from the valley? The guy replied that there are reasons why they live without agriculture. It's just to eat good food and have fun. The master said we should find out anyway. Yoltak said he hadn't finished yet. The young gentleman replied that he had already finished. The young man asked him to wait for him, because he was not yet full. I'm sneaking through the trees, along the beaten path. The head thought, why did he come there? He didn't come for nothing, and that's why he'd found out. He kept saying that if, because of that time, a man could also become head and move to Ilban. Then he started saying he shouldn't just talk. Looking at the house, rushing towards it, the head asked, Nari has come? After which he immediately handed him a bag of money. The man said that there was less there than last month. The head replied that it was because a young gentleman had suddenly arrived. He arrived for some reason. So, the chapter was off work for a few days and prepared for his arrival. Afterwards, he apologized. Nari said he heard he escaped not too long ago. And suddenly he shows up in Byragal, glaring at the head. The man ordered him to bring in double next month. After which Nari asked he hadn't forgotten why he was the head of the valley. Had he? The man asked how could he forget such a thing. Surely he will bring everything. Nari said to trust him. After the head thanked him, he was about to leave. Suddenly, the man asked what about him? Seeing that the man didn't immediately know what he was talking about, Nari called out the name Yultashik. The head replied to him not to worry. Now that his heart is broken, he can't even lift his head. The man is just an employee. Nari asked him if he was used to it. Then he said it was time to give a gift. The man asked his daughter, is she already an adult? The head replied that it is true. Her skin is so fine that soon she will not be able to pass the Samhao because of the deficiency. Nari asked the head, well, taking care that no one touches her? The man replied that of course. Isn't that what he asked for? For the drooling assholes, he just cooked up a pot. But to those who have nothing to look at, how could Nari be interested in such a person? The head doesn't understand. The man replied that he didn't need him to understand. Nari added that it was fine. Since the young lord had arrived there on his own, we should attract him with a woman. They had a connection. Have him put his daughter to bed. He came there for a reason. He was originally a merchant, so he came to save him. He needs guidance. The head replied that it's so sudden. What if something goes wrong? Nari replied what he thinks. Does he have the right to ask something? He just has to do what the man says. That's what he lives for. The head was leaving and thinking that Yultashik must have stolen even his wife. What a stupid child. Then, is it really about raising a daughter for this purpose? Nothing wrong if the head is good for the young master. Nari said he'd watch Teju fall. That way, they'll become alike. The basics of the Mayang cult is the worship of good gods and the salvation of living beings through fire. Nevertheless, the fire, for the illumination of living beings, burned everything and became the embodiment of real fire. This place could not be illuminated, so the Mayang cult became a demon cult. Yultak asked the young master where he was going. Frying day, he suggested that he should just find Yultashik. The young gentleman asked the lad if he noticed anything. Yultak replied that he did not, whereupon he asked, did he? Janchagik that he is. The boy asked, "And what is it?" The young gentleman replied that the number of houses exceeds the number of people. Yultak replied that if someone died, it was not strange at all. The gentleman then asked why there were most of the young people there. The guy asked, "Is that a problem?" Thinks it's the average age of people in Byregal. Point to the sun. The young gentleman asked, "Then how is the weather?" Yultak replied that the sky was clear, but it was stuffy. The guy asked, "Now the gentleman is powdering his head with the weather? Maybe he'll start getting debauched because of the heat?" Looking at his master, the boy told him that the day was really hot. Jan Shagik replied that it was really hot. The young gentleman said that was the problem. He walked briskly toward the girl. As soon as she saw him, she immediately fell to her knees and greeted the young master. Jan Shagik told her that even in such hot weather she wore such a skirt. The girl replied that she didn't know what he was talking about. Abruptly reaching down, he grabbed the girl's face and asked she doesn't understand. Even he was sweating. She immediately began to ask why he was doing this. Putting her on her back, the gentleman said that he would look at her now. Yultak started yelling, "What's the young master doing? They're on the street. Does he like that?" Lifting the girl's skirt, he thought that no doubt it was about those miniature flowers. They looked beautiful, but that girl's legs. The head kept walking and resenting it. To prepare for next month? Easy for him to say, why don't he become the head of the cult right now? Looking around, he jumped off the bridge and dove straight into the water. When he reached the bottom, he swam toward the cave. When he surfaced, he began to say that he had to change his place. He was not a floating rat. A man sitting at the entrance told him, "Welcome back. Did the head ask you to lose weight?" "Not working at all." The man replied that he had said he didn't need any more, but the casino was still working. The head walked past the men and saw them fighting, saying he was cheating. They gambled everything they have. The man said that even if the young master is there, he knows that the valley is empty. The head replied that if he was leaving, let him go. Why did the young master go there? It's obvious. Entering a private room, the head told the guy that he would drool tomorrow. Let him not make a fuss and bring everyone without exception. Otherwise, they wouldn't make it to next month. Just as the guy was about to leave, the head asked him where Yultashik was now. The guy said he's probably with his daughter right now. He should be with her all the time, except when she is working. The head replied that okay, then have him bring both of them. After that, he ordered to tell her that let her wash. He should put her in bed with the young master. The boy was surprised. The head wanted to give her away, even though it was forbidden to touch her. He replied that unfortunately, sacrifices would have to be made for the cause. The guy replied that he understood. It would be enough for him. Trying to feed my father. The girl said he should eat well. The man said let her eat too. The girl said she was full. Yulharan told me what they say. The high-ranking people from Myung Palace arrived today. Everyone seems to be having a hard time because of it. Yultashik interjected. Small Myung Palace? The girl asked her father also heard. Is that where the young master lives? Looking at her father, the girl thought again, remembering the past. She wondered what her father had been like back then. Her words had done that to him. The head said that father has a long-standing chronic illness. Make sure he takes the medicine he gave. The girl realized it wasn't a chronic illness. They needed to get out of there as soon as possible. Suddenly, at that moment, there was a knock at the door. When the girl opened it, she asked why. The guy replied that his head was calling. She asked, at a time like this? Isn't he with the head of the small palace? He replied that he didn't know anything, so he should hurry up and take his father with him. The guy told her to stop talking and then asked if they could help. The girl said no, they're on their way. Let them just wait a little longer. Looking at her, he told her to go wash up. As he closed the door, she realized that something seemed wrong. Going to her father, she told him that the head of the valley was waiting for them. They had to go. She had a bad feeling. She didn't understand what would happen. Once inside, the girl wondered if this was a casino. She knew her father hated strange places, but why was he suddenly so calm? Yulharan wondered if he was already there. The man shouted why they were standing up. Let them go ahead. As soon as they almost reached the door, the guy ordered him to go alone. The head said he wanted to give a special medicine for her father. The girl replied that there was no need. He hadn't drunk it for a long time, so it was enough. She grabbed her father's hand and said that they would go together. Looking at her, he said he was asking nicely. The girl immediately let go of her father's hand. Holding her hand, the man asked his daughter not to leave. The guy asked, yes, what's wrong with them? They said medicine. Let her go. He asked, what do you mean no? He doesn't like it? Maybe he should give it to her right away. After seeing this, the man immediately let go of his daughter's hand. The guy said, let the man look. It's all good, right? Looking at the girl, he asked, why is she still standing? The head is waiting. Let her go to him. With tears in her eyes, she thought that if her father waited just a little while, she would definitely come back for him. As soon as the head saw her, he said, let her go through. It's her first time there, right? She can sit wherever she wants. Yulharan replied that thanks, but no thanks. The head said that her father didn't listen at first either. Anyway, she's all over him. He came very close to the girl. With a tremor in her voice, she asked why he was calling her. After stroking her face, the head asked what she was afraid of. Why is the girl shaking so much? They wouldn't see each other for a couple of days. Is she disgusted? He's going to get filthy anyway. What's the big deal? The more colors he sees, the more it hurts him. Jumping away from him, she asked what he was talking about. What was wrong with him? The head asked, has the girl forgotten who raised her? He was the reason her father had lived this long. He would give her a chance to repay. What was she afraid of? Heron asked him to stay back. The head called her ungrateful. He said he even knows her absence is getting worse. She's turning her back on him. Doesn't the girl want to escape from there with her father? The chapter will give her that opportunity. The girl asked if it was true. He said of course it was. Anyway, he doesn't care about them. She can go anywhere she wants, anytime she wants, except tonight. The head told her that the girl must sleep with the head of the small palace. She realized that the head of the small palace was a hunter of women's bodies who caused others trouble depending on his mood. Looking at the chapter, the girl asked what if she didn't go. He asked then what and how would she earn, told her that her father owed him, so the head should at least sell her. The girl shouted no. He shouted that her father had been receiving medication until today. Does she even know how much they cost? The girl didn't think they were just given away, did she? Isn't it hard for her father and her to get out of there? Then she won't see life at all. Who knows if he might like the girl and make her his concubine? He asked what she would do if her eyes swelled with tears. Would she want to see her father's limbs cut off? Looking at the girl, he asked if it had to be done now. As soon as the man shouted to the guys, she immediately said okay, only asking not to touch her father, that it's the right thing to do. Her time will come soon, so let her get ready. And she better not be talking nonsense. What she'd heard about him, he didn't like to be coddled. Let him remember that if he wants to keep his life. The head said it was enough to reach his heart as well. Tomorrow we'll see more. If he could sell all things for one price. As he entered his chambers, the young lord thought of a valley where you can't get drunk but have luxurious choruses. There's nothing to rob. Is there any way to get the money back there? Maybe with a drug? He remembered that he agreed to the rules. Drug making was only allowed in the Poison Palace, and violating it had a number of consequences. If the Lord guessed correctly, then Yultashik is in second place. The boy realized that he wouldn't forgive the valley head, but he was nowhere to be found. He'd been all over the valley. It would take a mill to poison 1,000 people, but there's no such place. As someone knocked on the door and asked permission to enter, the young gentleman said he could come in. After introducing herself, the girl said her name was Yulharan. It was obvious from his gaze that he didn't expect to see a girl. The young lord wondered, was the demon cult originally full of young beauties? He realized that she was really beautiful. She was so-and-so at our place, like a little sister. Lowering her eyes to the floor, the girl asked the young master to take her. The lord was clearly surprised. He realized that she was definitely sent by the head of the valley. There was only one question in his mind. It's a strange-looking man who is known as a pervert, but yet he let the girl in. He realized that it was impossible not to make mistakes in such a case. In one swift motion, he picked her up and pushed her onto the bed. Yulharan asked what was wrong with him. The young master told her quietly, let him be quiet. He thought about the girl saying to take her, and then looking at him with those eyes. He's not that kind of person. The guy asked if he was afraid. The girl immediately shouted that no, she was not afraid at all. Looking at her, he replied that he didn't think so. She shouted that it was true. She was never scared. The master asked if she knew who he was. Is that why she came? Yulharan replied that he was a young master. The guy said he was also known as a pervert. If she knows, she should have been prepared. He offered to look. The girl asked what he was saying. He didn't understand why asked that of him. If she had come to do her job, then let her do it. He asked what a man and a woman could do in the same bedroom. Or did she come for reasons other than her own? The girl shouted that not at all, then asked what he was doing. The master didn't understand why she was so frightened again. If the girl froze, then he should do everything. She said no, just let him give her some time. The master replied that first saying to take her, and now she needs time. Mocking him, Yulharan replied that it wasn't like that at all. In a trembling voice, the girl said that it was just her first time. Exhaling, the young master told her to go back inside. He told her to leave. An immature woman like that was not hers, not his type. The girl immediately grabbed his arm. Sir asked what she was doing. Is she trying to make a drama? Haran replied that she wasn't. He asked then what? The girl replied that she wanted to ask him something. Why is he acting this way with her? Shouldn't the master just take her? Jan Chagak replied that he had already said she was not his type. The girl asked if she just needed to look right. Suddenly, she jumped on him. The young gentleman asked what the girl was doing. She replied that she was doing what he asked her to do. After handling her, he put her on the bed and grabbed her arms. The girl said that now the master could do whatever he wanted to her. He thought he was going to do it to his sinners again. He said if he didn't like it, he'd have to get rid of her. That applies to anyone. Isn't she afraid? The girl said she was afraid, very afraid. The young master replied that it was fine since she wanted it so badly. Hitting the blood vessels on her spine, she fainted. Waking up, the girl screamed. The young master said that that was it. He realized she didn't remember if he'd done anything. He realized that she didn't remember if he had done anything. The master asked the girl if she was satisfied. Just as she wanted, he did everything for her. Yulharan suddenly said she had something. The Lord thought to himself, is it really worth doing something so stupid? He asked her if it was something serious enough. She said yes, it was very important. Crying, the girl said that even this disgusting body went to the master. He realized that even though nothing had happened, she didn't know it. Unexpectedly, the girl thanked the young gentleman, and he replied that she should thank those who had wronged her. The boy realized that she was really an honest woman. Crying again, she said she came of her own free will, so she asks him to save her and her father. Looking at Haran, the gentleman asked her father. The girl replied that yes, begging him to please let him save them. Master asked is she so naive, or hadn't heard of him at all? What made her think he would listen to a girl and her body? Haran replied that a girl who only has her body, what else can she do? The master replied that she was very mercantile for coming to him with such thoughts. He wondered knows how reckless and facile were the actions and judgments of the former owner of this body. Turning the chair toward the bed, the gentleman said he would listen to her. If the girl did not satisfy his interest, he would cut her throat. Looking at her, he asked if she was deaf or dumb. The girl immediately began to tell him that her father was ill. If she was not by his side, he would not be able to live a day. The master asked what next. She screamed that very humble people live there. Some of them can't even reach their toes. She wants to live with her father. The girl began to go on with her story, but the gentleman interrupted her by asking her what her father's name was. Haran answered that his last name was Yule and his first name was Teschik. As he looked at the girl, he thought it was much worse than he'd realized. The master replied to the girl that he understood. He said she could take it easy and rest well. Then again she lost consciousness. Looking at the table in his room, he thought it looked like the pouch contained the exact medicine her father had been taking. Entering Yultak's room, the young gentleman woke him up. The boy asked why he was awake at this hour. Placing the pouch on his table, the gentleman asked if he knew what it was. Yultak replied that it was something familiar. The guy asked where the gentleman got it from. By the color it obviously looks very expensive. Young Chagak asked, is it Mahansen? Yultak replied that of course, the Lord knows, he used to have fun. That was the reason why the head of the demon cult banned harsh punishments. Now it can only be found in the Poison Palace. Plus, does he remember when he was 14? He set the Poison Palace on fire from eating it, and his pupils got huge. Master realized that this guy knew too much about him. Looking at Yultak, the young master ordered him to try it. The boy asks what's that for? As he laughs, it is the third thing he never does. 1 is casinos, 2 is drinking, 3 is drugs. So don't let the gentleman even try. Looking at him, the guy said that if he can't even do that, then what can he do? The Lord said that's how it was. Then he had no choice. He threw the contents of the pouch right at the boy. He's young Chaguk, and it's not revenge or spite. The fact that the effect is immediate speaks to its danger. The young master burned off the full effect of his inner power. After that, he would have no addiction. Young Chaguk thought about Changchun taking a path he shouldn't have chosen. The master took out the very same mask. One of the boys called him a silly old man, saying that he didn't know yet. The man replied that it was better to let him worry about himself. His daughter would be taken care of by the young master. Yultashik grabbed his leg, calling him a stubborn old man. The man started beating him. He asked if he had any strength left after eating so many drugs. They didn't understand why the headman hadn't ordered him killed yet. What use is he? The boy said it was because of his daughter. But since she had been sold to the young lord, his hour of death was at hand. The man said he didn't like him from the start. A decrepit old man, but he always had that look in his eyes. The guy said he'd heard he was a big shot back in the day. He replied that unless he was doing small business in a trading house, or was one of the ones hanging around the priestesses from the palace of the holy fire. Seeing the look in the old man's eyes, the man asked if he should kill him himself. The guy replied, let him calm down. Does he want to be punished by the village headman? The man wondered if he could tell him he died of disease. Let him just look at his eyes, that defiant look again. The old man kept repeating that they should return his daughter. After hitting him a few times, the man yelled that he was a scavenger. He said he would kill him if he did it again. The boy asked if he'd die if they left him like that. He's lost so much blood. The man asked, what's in it for them? So there'll be one less old man in the dungeon. He hit his head on the floor and died. So that would be their alibi. They talked about the brats just living out their days. The man said that the children of the scum could be very useful. They produce drugs day and night in the hope of getting their parents out of bed, not knowing that they are sitting on them. They probably think that their old people are getting treatment in the hospital and living well. Reaching out, the man said that anyway, if the village headman and the young master got along, they could finally get away from that hole. Turning around, the man saw his friend lying on the ground. Suddenly, someone attacked him from behind, and he joined his friend. The young gentleman thought that was it. Opening a playhouse under the valley wasn't enough for them. Still holding and poisoning those old people, the guy realized there was more to it. There was still the drug manufacturing site. Maybe it's behind the door he walked past. He realized that he couldn't save all the people because they didn't even have control over their own bodies. He promised in his mind that he would definitely come back for them. Suddenly, in one part of the dungeons, he heard some kind of moaning. As he approached, the boy saw exactly what it was. He knew that the old man looked bad, but there could be no mistake. The former leader of the Gwaemyeong demonic art squad, Yultashik, he had seen him in the book. Entering his cell, the guy asked him if he was okay. Looking at him, the gentleman realized that the old man was in a terrible state. His ducts were severely damaged. He wondered if it was the drugs. The external damage is serious, but the biggest problem is his mind. The points near his forehead and the area around his scalp were sealed. There was barely any life in his body. Looking at the boy, the old man said he had a request. The young master thought, is this the last wish? The guy realized he was really on death's door. He told the old man not to give up so easily. Yultashik asked him to fulfill his request. He told the Lord to let no one know he was dead. The boy thought the old man was a fool. He asked me for salvation or vengeance. He just wanted his daughter not to know he was dead. So that's where he'll meet his end? The young master realized that he could save him. Even if the chance wasn't great, it was still there, through the infusion of life force. So he would be able to restore his energy channels with his chi. It wouldn't be that hard to restore his channels, but the inner chi. After which, the young master thought that he had enough hesitation. He didn't have time for it at all. All demonic sect arts use the heavenly demon god art as a foundation, since the martial arts he had mastered belonged to one such sect. At one point the Lord realized that the old man was absorbing his chi. The guy realized that his Duntun wasn't destroyed. The problem was a lack of chi. Master didn't understand how this was possible. The old man was absorbing his chi so quickly. The question was regarding the amount of his chi and the size of his Duntun. If young master's energy isn't enough, then he might die himself. But it's too late to stop now. He will give him all of his energy without a trace. The master realized that he was still absorbing. He realized then that all that was left was 240 years. The guy realized that almost his entire supply of chi had been used up. There was nothing left. If his Duntun were even a little more than master, the guy might as well have died. Looking at the old man, the Lord saw the changes in his body. Coming out, he was already at the awakening stage. Seeing the boy, Yultashik asked who the young man was. The master asked for permission to breathe for a while. The man said that despite his ignorant origins, he had risen from the bottom thanks to his strong body. He always cared for those around him, even after he became an important person. Therefore, he was followed and respected. When he became squad leader, there were many people from the 7 palaces and the Council of Elders who wanted to work for him or get to know him better, but he chose an old friend he had grown up with. There was even a period when the man was called one of the Great Five of Gwanmyang, the mobs of Gwanmyang Palace, but he preferred a quiet and happy life in seclusion. At that moment, it seemed like the happiness would last forever. But everything came crashing down when he decided to go for training to reach the awakening stage. The woman asked him if he really needed to leave them. The man replied to his wife that he was sorry. As the leader of the Gwanmyang Demon Art Masters, he is obliged to reach the awakening stage. Worried about his wife, who would be alone with his daughter, he asked people he trusted to take care of them while he was in seclusion. During his absence, they were kidnapped by bandits. He had to finish his studies early. He gathered his squad of Gwanmyang High Demon Art Masters and set out to find the kidnappers. We did everything we could to find him, but unfortunately he was too late. He doesn't even have anyone to blame for what happened. The blame lies solely on him. If the man hadn't been so unabashedly greedy, if he'd chosen another place to train. The guy asked, so did he go crazy? Teshchik said he just couldn't get over it. Why did he need martial arts now? He wanted to kill himself many times. Eventually, he stopped practicing martial arts and began using drugs to dull the pain. The gentleman asked if he had blocked his own channels, then asked if the man regretted that the guy saved his life. Yultashik replied that his mind was clouded, but he remembers everything that happened. The man is grateful to him. He will remember it for the rest of his life. The man said he wanted to ask the boy a question. Did he come from Myung Palace? The gentleman realized that Sunbae seemed to have given him a fake. The man said that the boy might not answer if it was difficult. He had transferred a lot of energy to it. Only the Myung cult's martial art has the energy of sacred fire. Only one martial art could merge with his Azura blood heaven art. This is the supreme art of demonic moisture. Only people who belong to Gwanmyang Palace or Myung Palace can master it. Getting down on one knee, the man said that his humble servant would follow him until death. Even if the boy ordered him to raise Mount Tai to the ground, he would do it. He'd want something in return. The man said his unfortunate daughter as the guy suddenly interrupted him. The master replied that if he meant Julharan, there was no need to worry. She was fine. Nothing had happened to her. The guy replied that he wasn't stupid enough to lie to a master who had reached the awakening stage. But he felt a little ashamed that he had used her acupuncture point to put her to sleep. The man replied that if she was with a man like him, she couldn't wish for anything better. The life he had saved belonged to him now. One word from him, and he would do anything for the Lord. The boy thought what a straightforward and honest man he was. The young gentleman hopes he will be someone he can trust with his back. The guy said the village chief and the young lord would be there tomorrow. The man could do what he saw fit with them. The man replied that he understood. The boy asked only one thing, to let the young master live. Now, all they had to do was wait for tomorrow. The boy told the young gentleman that the village chief had arrived. He replied that he could come in. Turning to the gentleman, the head asked if he liked his gift. The boy replied that what the man had sent was to his liking. The man said he knew he'd like it. He was saving it for a special occasion, then said he hoped the guy liked what they sent with her. The gentleman pretended that he did not understand at once. The man tried to explain everything with his hands. The boy's gray, boring life was back in color. It would not be an exaggeration to say that they sent him the elixir of happiness. He asked how they were able to create something like this. The man replied that he must have noticed flowering plants on his way there. That's the opium poppy, the main ingredient. That plant is the highest grade, with red flowers, beautiful like a young bride. If you cut it about 10 days after ripening, you can extract the extract, and if you hold it over a fire. The young gentleman thought of the man himself saying everything. He asked what next? Asked him to tell him. The head replied that it turns out to be something interesting. the kind you can't find in any regular market. They called it devil's dust. The name suits him. The master thought, what a telling name. A hint that he was worthy of the devil himself. The head said that if the gentleman liked it, they could provide any number he wanted. The boy replied that it was not fitting for such a talented man to be living in this small village. The head replied that he was flattered that the Lord had such an opinion of him. Looking at his expression, the boy asked, something wrong? He told me that the cult's rules would not allow them to expand their network beyond this village. Then he asked the gentleman, and he noticed, didn't he? There are many beggars in the village who have nowhere else to go. As the head of the village, it is his duty to take care of them. For the sake of the suffering people, the man started doing all this. With fury in his eyes, the gentleman replied as nobly. To think he had similar motives. Now he looked at it from a different perspective. So for the sake of helping the suffering, he put them on drugs? The head said that if they could sell their goods outside the village, these people would get a second chance. The master suggested this is the way to go. He will take a look at the place where they are producing the devil's dust, and then think about how to solve their issue. The head asked if he could help. The boy replied that he was a young lord. Even though his authority was not that high, he could solve the problem. The answer is that's right. One day he will be the head of the whole cult. The master replied that it would not be good to leave him there. Then she asked if the head would like to go to Myung's small palace in the future. The man replied that he thanked him for this favor on behalf of his descendants. The young gentleman replied that that was fine, and now he could drive it. The man replied that of course. Standing on the bridge, the head said they were more concerned with stealth. The young master said it was time to leave. The head immediately jumped off the bridge into the water. The guy thought it looked pretty ridiculous in the daylight. They made a shelter right in front of everyone. Emerging from the water, the young gentleman thought they had settled in pretty well. The head said they had to be sure not to be discovered, whereupon the order to stand still and quickly run and carry the towel. The young gentleman replied that it was all right. He told the man that he really is a genius. Guess it was pretty hard to build a shelter like that. The head replied that yes, he is a handyman. If you need anything, you can contact him. The man said that they were taking precautions, but it was still better to let him hide his face. The gentleman thought that he had prepared himself. He told me that all these people had come to their village, mostly criminals who had decided to lay low in the middle of nowhere. The gentleman thought about the fact that he had put together a pretty good show and hadn't given himself away yet. Jan Chagik decided to say what he heard. That girl's father is there too. The head asked if she was the one who told him about it. The boy replied that yes, he was the village chief and should know about it, shouldn't he? The Lord thought how good he was at pretending. If he didn't know the truth, he would have believed him. Laughing, the head replied that a lot of people come in and out of the village, so he could look for him. The young gentleman replied that he should forget about it. They had more important things to do. The head replied that he did, and showed him where to go with his finger. The man thought what an ungrateful creature she was. She had blurted it out. Fortunately, the young master didn't suspect a thing. He'd put some sense into her head. The guy figured that if he was going to show him the secret vault, he should reveal other secrets as well, since he had decided that he would be his pass to a rich life. Sooner or later, the master would have found out. After showing him the whole production, the head asked what the gentleman thought. The guy replied that it was very impressive. The head said that for 3 years he had invested all of himself in the construction of this place. The Lord replied that he had done a good job. Then he asked the men around him if they were mercenaries. The head replied that of course not. He said that they were under his personal command. The man recruited them from various dark sects, whereupon the gentleman pointed his finger in the direction of the people. The head replied that they were just stupid people trying to help their kin. The gentleman asked again to help the family. The man replied that yes, I'm not sure if he had noticed it, but a lot of the villagers are on their drug. They give them a large dose and then slowly reduce the amount. It causes hallucinations. People tear their skin, trying to get rid of the non-existent bugs and go crazy. They think they have taken their medicine and ask for more. And so they're ready to do whatever they want. Meanwhile, the lives of their loved ones are slowly being snuffed out by the drug. The master replied that this is how they make them their faithful slaves. So people don't even realize that they are addicted to the drug? The head replied that's right. If they start to wither away from it, they become excellent test subjects for the dark sects. The young gentleman thought about the fact that there would be no forgiveness for him. How many people had died because of him? Suddenly, The head asked something wrong. The guy replied that no, he was just thinking. The young gentleman thought it was time for the hero to go on stage. Suddenly, they heard a sound coming from the dungeon. The guys didn't understand what was going on. The man saw Yultashik in front of him. Then he asked, "Isn't this old man dead yet? How did he get out of the dungeon?" The men didn't understand why he had changed so much. They barely realized it was the same old man. One of them replied that it was hard to recognize him, but don't worry, he was poisoned. Suddenly, they asked him if he was the one who had torn up the wall. Calling them little mutts, the old man asked them how well they were doing up there. The men didn't understand if he was sane again. But how? The dust no longer worked. They didn't understand how it had happened. The old man replied that it was better to let him worry about what would happen now. Yultashik says he doesn't know what the Lord will say, but he can't hold back. The old man promises they won't die easily. And don't expect mercy from the blood demon Azura. After the old man had disposed of some of his subordinates, he decided to go to the next room. The head didn't understand what was going on there. The head shouted, "What the hell?" The old man was walking straight towards him and said that for a whole 10 years that stupid father kept on living. The man said he truly wanted to die, thought about it over and over again. Only the thought of his daughter kept him in this world. He said he wouldn't let anyone hurt her. The man asked if he was out of his mind, and he started getting violent in there. The head asked Yultashik what happened to him. Should he go to a healer? In one day, he got rid of the poisoning and regained his form. He said it was a pity they had already given his daughter to the young lord, so the man was too late. Then the head asked what he was going to do now. Looking at the guy, the old man told the young master to leave if he didn't want to die. The boy immediately replied that it was fine, turned around and started to leave. The head immediately asked the young gentleman where he was going. The boy replied that it was a pity they could not see the obvious. Greed had blinded them and robbed them of their sanity. The head replied that he was a fool. Why was he afraid? He is the head, and in the name of heaven everyone will be rewarded according to his deeds. Looking at them, Yultashik replied that he promised they would enjoy the recompense. Calling the old man an idiot, the head shouted, "Why are they standing up? He doesn't have any chi. Let them grab him." Cooking regular junkie, he should have tried to escape instead of digging his own grave. Just as the man wanted to attack the old man, he used his magic and got behind him. With one blow, he was torn into 1,000 small pieces. The men didn't understand what he had done. Had Yultashik regained his energy? The old man shouted that it was time to tear them all apart. The men shouted that he was alone. Strong though he was, they could all attack at once. As soon as they began to attack him, the old man began to run precisely to meet them and tear apart all the bodies one by one. The head started yelling that they were useless idiots. Let them do something to him. Behind whose back the head was hiding, replied that he was only asking for solutions to problems. He told the old man that he had a favorable offer. Then he held out the sack and asked him if he knew what it was. The man went on to say that this is what he likes so much, right? High-quality devil's dust. He hadn't forgotten. Had he? When he saw the old man pulling his hand towards the pouch, he said that that was it. Let him take it. Then he swung his sword, grasping and clutching the sword with his hand. Yultashik replied that of course he hadn't forgotten about what that thing had done to him. He hadn't forgotten anything, not even what they had done to him and his daughter Yulharan. Striking the man hard, the old man shouted that they wouldn't all die there so easily. The head didn't understand what was wrong with him. He thought the old man was just addicted to drugs. I guess that's why everyone tries to be nice to him. In a few seconds, the old man was beside him. Looking around, the Lord thought to find out who was behind the headman, but Yultashik clearly wouldn't let him live. The higher demonic arts do not include specific techniques. It's just a cultivation method using a person's internal energy. But there are recordings to help reproduce some of the techniques, like the ultimate demonic art, the fiery walk of fire. Suddenly, the whole field caught fire. The Lord thought that it seems the people are desperate or cursing him. How long had they been living like this? They don't even realize that those flowers made them lose their strength and will. Are people really that stupid? But who's to say it was their fault? They only wanted to save their family and friends. Seeing no other way, they worked there, forgetting about techniques and cults. I wish my Lord knew the demonic sects, steeped in luxury, oblivious to the teachings of the sacred fire and the orthodoxy who justify any action by saying that it serves justice. Could any of them be considered right? He wondered what he should do next. According to the teachings of the sacred fire, the Lord must burn them all to purify them, to save them through purification by fire, and to show them the forgiveness of heaven. The people began to shout that it was the sun cult god with her who had gone before them. They fell to their knees and thanked the dark sun for giving them the fire of purification with her sword. The young master realized it was over. He couldn't just walk away, but he could make a difference. After a massive explosion, people shouted Dark Sunday. Since there are people who need it, people were shouting outside the Lord's house. Had the small palace of the sun turned its back on its followers? Where would they go then? Yultak was nervous and asked where he was. The guy said he'd go crazy. If this keeps up, they'll break in and tear the place apart. Looking at Yulharan, the guy asked if she knew where the young master was. The girl replied that she didn't. Holding his head, he began to say that there had not been a single quiet day since the Lord had returned. Young Chagak asked just what? Leave the small sun palace? Can settle in this village. The Lord doesn't mind. The boy asked how the gentleman got there. Did he even see what was going on outside? This wasn't the time, though. They needed to hide as soon as possible. The master asked why all of a sudden. Yultak replied that he should see what was going on outside. If they see him, they will tear him to shreds. As soon as the young gentleman opened the window, people began to shout that he had finally arrived. Let them come out, for he is a tyrant who has betrayed his followers. Looking out the window, Yultak asked why they had all gone so quiet. Suddenly, the door opened abruptly, and Yultashik appeared on the threshold. Quickly heading in his direction, the girl thought it was her father. Then she bowed her head and thought that no, it couldn't be. The man replied that he didn't believe it either. Then he said that he swore she would never live in fear again. Placing his hand on the girl's shoulder, he asked her to forgive the old fool. Looking at him with tears in her eyes, the girl asked, "Is it really him?" The man replied that he would protect her from that day forward and for the rest of his life. He then hugged his daughter tightly. Yultak asked the young master what was going on. Is this a family reunion? The guy asked him to be quiet and not spoil the moment for people. Sunbee's cult, Water Peak Market. Sunbei thought about the fact that there was twice as much information, and the documents he had to study were now 5 times as many. They asked why the man was taking so long to open. He didn't understand why are they in such a hurry. They must have some patience. Yultak asked what he was carrying. Couldn't he see that they were soaked to the skin? The girl asked her father to go faster. Turning to the young gentleman, Jagalton asked how he was to make sense of it all. Observing what was happening, he asked if the young gentleman would bother to explain the situation to the old man. Pointing my finger at the drawing, the girl said it's a young gentleman. It's well drawn. Watching them, the guy thought they were acting like they were at home. Jan Shagak said that they were coming from the Valley of Scoundrels. They were on their way to the small Palace of the Sun, but it started raining and they had to seek shelter. Jagalton asked if he had not understood his question. He didn't think it was possible to go there uninvited and expect a warm welcome. Jan Shagak replied that he had opened the door for them after all. The man looked at the boy carefully and then laughed and replied that he had. The man introduced himself, saying his name was Tong Jagal. He was seen to have health problems, so he could not greet them properly. Yultashik asked, was he the one who told the young master to look for him? How did he even figure it out? Jagalton replied that he had been watching him for a long time, even when he was in that village. Turning to him, the man said he hadn't answered his question, so he had been hiding, watching him, and had done so even when he had gotten into that hole. Jagalton replied not to get heated. There was no reason for it. He doesn't know much about him, since the man has been in the Valley of Scoundrels for a full 10 years, so he will continue to watch him to compensate for it. Yultashik replied that he could watch him as long as he didn't die of old age. The man said he wouldn't die, so he had another reason to live longer. Observed what was happening. The young gentleman thought that the warrior and the scholar, they are like water and oil, they will not find common ground. The guy said enough is enough. It's not worth it for people who live practically under the same roof to fight. He said they are like rivers that flow into the ocean. They were once separated, but now they are gathered there in this palace. Guy hopes that the new members of the cult will be imbued with common ideas so that the palace of the Lesser Sun can be revived. He said he swears he will stay the course and accomplish that goal. The boy thought that was the promise of his adopted son. He wanted to trust these men, who were about to become part of the palace, and to go with him to the end, whatever it might be. Yoltak replied that he got goosebumps. Doesn't the young master think that this is not the time and place for such speeches? Everyone laughed at his words. Looking at them, the young gentleman thought that promises are made to be broken, right? Sitting at the communal table, the man told them that the inhabitants of the Valley of Scoundrels had finally quieted down. That's fine then. So they should focus on the 7 palaces. The young master might want to gather those who don't belong to any palace, but unfortunately they don't have time for that. In 4 months, the great festival of heaven will begin, and they will have to do one of 2 things: either increase their influence or weaken the influence of the others. They have no other choice. The 7 palaces of the Sun Cult, each of them owns a seriously sized squad of fighters and is on par with the 10 great Orthodox sects. Their leaders hold high positions in the Sun Cult, assuming that they are the oldest members of the entire association and have reached the highest stage of elevation. The demonic cult is simply incredibly powerful. Yoltak asked, why are they even sitting around discussing this? Looking at him, the young gentleman asked, does he seem bored? Pauline said that it does get boring. The young gentleman replied that it was all right. It would soon get more interesting. Jagalton began to say that from the outside, it looks like the palaces are cooperating, but in reality they are competing with each other. He said that if it weren't for that, the Sun Cult would have been ruled by a new leader long ago. Yoltashik said that if they decided to upset the balance of power, the palaces would be very unhappy. The man replied that was right. The 7 palaces of the Sun Cult were planning to make a fuss over the absence of the cult leader. During the great festival of heaven, the heads of palaces will vie for the right to become the next leader. Someone said that since the young master is back, it should make a difference. The man replied that there would certainly be those who would want to kill the young lord, and those who would decide to take advantage of him. Yoltashik replied that as long as he lived, no one would dare to harm his master. The old man replied that he would very much like to believe that, but he won't be able to handle them alone. The only suitable option for the young lord is to join the confrontation of the palaces. He can try to become the new head of the cult. Yoltak asked why? To die valiantly? The man suggests he just go and die there, doesn't he? Jagalton replied that the road to eminence is always a thorny one. The guy replied that yes, but it was a lost cause there. Turning to the young gentleman, the boy asked if he could ask a question. Jan Shagik asked what other question? Yoltak thought briefly and asked if they could go back to the corridor of the higher demons. The man went on to say that there were currently 3 candidates being singled out for the next head position. The head of the Blood Arts Palace, Yi Yulchin, the head of the Destruction Palace, Gu Yangryong, and the oldest, Hong Raksen. All of them are the strongest masters who have reached the highest stages of development. There is only one plus: they do not intend to give in to each other. He said that the Trade Palace seems to be helping the Palace of Blood Arts, the Palace of Pleasure, and the Palace of Destruction at the same time, but in reality, they are only pretending. Their influence is growing, and it is only a matter of time before a conflict and confrontation erupts over some minor issue. And when that happens, he'll have the opportunity to take advantage of the confusion and take over as head of the cult. Yoltashik said that the average librarian acts like he knows everything about the Sun Cult. The man replied that how meticulous does he have to be to study all the documents about the Sun Cult? Tashik replied that I, too, would have no reason to be scheming and strategizing. The Lord could simply occupy the Sun Palace. Jagalton replied that this would have worked a year ago, but things were different now. The moment the Lord took the Sun Palace, 4 palaces would swoop down on them at once and destroy them. Yoltashik shouted that there was no way. He said that once the Sun Palace, and then the old man interrupted him, saying that there was only 20%. This is their chance to win, even with the Sun Palace backing them. Yoltak shouted that the old man seemed to be mistaken, not 20, but soon to be 2%. The Sun Palace has weakened quite a bit in recent years, and the current cult leader has been missing for a couple years. Yoltashik asked if they had become so strong. Jagalton replied that they had. If the Sun Palace went up against them alone, there would be no chance at all. Yoltak asked, and who would think of helping them for the sake of a minuscule increase in odds? The young gentleman said how noisy he was, then shut it off. The man asked how the Sun Cult had become like this. The old man replied that although the power of the masters was growing, there was no one who could competently manage them and the cult as a whole. The result is before their eyes. The young lord thought that it seems the demonic cult and the central plains aren't too different. A storm is coming. The gentleman thought he had gone quiet. When he woke up, the guy began to say, "Is this really how they should act? Can't they just lay low and wait for the head to return? Why are they trying to do something they can't do? The slightest mistake and they're all dead." Yulharan said that she didn't really understand the situation, but in the Valley of Scoundrels, the girl lived in the shadows for a very long time because she couldn't change anything. As time went on, things only got worse. She thinks if they have to do it anyway, it's better to face the problem head-on. Suddenly, the girl apologized for speaking out of turn. The young gentleman replied that it was true. The guy realized that it was exactly as she said. If they didn't do anything to change the situation today, it would be the same tomorrow. The guy said he only wanted to accomplish one thing, to turn that place into a sun cult. Yultak asked, "Isn't that what it's called?" He replied that it looked more like a demonic cult. They would begin their journey to that goal with this man, and then he pointed to the portrait, the 12th most powerful in the sun cult, the head of the Chong Seimin trading palace. 2 days later, the small palace of the sun, the young master was counting the stars. 7 was only enough to reach the peak phase of the exaltation stage. With 8, a master would be able to reach the awakening stage and overcome the limitation of the human body. And when they become 9, he must be careful with this art. He has only 7 stars. He has not yet mastered it. Once he reached the 9 stars, his acupuncture point would be overflowing with demonic energy. There would be a strange feeling developing through his body. He will become a heavenly demon. Whether the young master wants it or not, the whole world will know about it. The girl asked the young gentleman if he was unwell. She began to apologize for not understanding his motives. He even gave her and her father a separate house. He thought it looked like her father had explained everything to her. The guy told her he didn't have to. From now on, she can live the life she wants. That's how they live there, in the small palace of the sun. Yulharan asked if the Lord could give her some sort of task, if there was one. At least that way she would repay his kindness. Looking at her, the boy thought father to daughter. Suddenly, a guy shouted out that the merchant palace is asking to meet the young master. The palace of destruction is asking to see the young master. When he heard that, he thought it was the young master, the southern gate of the small sun palace. Watching them, people wondered if this was not the forbidden unit of the merchant palace and the ghostly unit of the soaring pleasure palace. What are they doing in there? What kind of trouble are they going to cause? Chun Imyu said he thought it smelled bad in there. They should be wagging their tails at the brothels by now. What are they still doing there? Chi Hami, the young head of the pleasure palace, replied that wasn't it the toad that tried to harm the young leader by bringing him to the Golden Sky Gallery? The guy replied that he should shut his filthy mouth. How dare they say he tried to harm the young leader? Let her fuck off while he's in a good mood. If all goes well, he'll ask her out for a drink. The girl asked, does he really have money? Is Toad alcohol still expensive? Calling them stolen bitches, the girl immediately questioned back. Was he referring to himself? Suddenly, the gate opened and Yultak appeared in front of them along with Yultashik. The girl asked immediately who was that there? She hadn't seen them before. Chun Amu replied that it was Yultak. Suddenly, a young gentleman appeared in front of them and asked what they guys were doing. He recognized them as the Pleasure Palace and the Palace of Merchants. Looking at them, the gentleman said how impertinent it was. Yultak started yelling. What are these assholes doing? Aren't they going to pay their respects to the young leader? Then everyone kneeled down. Looking at Chunama, the girl said that he really is a spineless bastard. Looking at the girl, Yultak asked what she was doing there. Chi Hami replied that she had nothing to do with him. Please move aside. Turning to the young leader, the girl said she was glad to meet him. They hadn't seen him in a while. Was he feeling well? Yultak asked why she was acting so flirtatious. Amu told the guy that he realized today they should be on the same page. Perhaps he had already realized it too. The guy replied that if the toad was going to talk to himself, let him go talk to the wall. The girl said they were both bastards. Turning to his assistant, the young gentleman asked him to escort them inside. Yultak told the girl that she would go in first. Chi Hami replied that as I expected from a young leader. The Pleasure Palace is much better than the Palace of Sweaty Merchants. Turning to the girl, the young gentleman asked if it was hot. She replied that it was not at all. He asked her then not to wave her skirt around. Let her say her word and leave. The girl replied that he seemed to be interested in literature lately. She was so surprised to receive such an exquisite letter from the gentleman. Young Chagak asked a refined letter. He said it sounded like the girl wanted to say that the gentleman couldn't write exquisite letters before. She replied that she wasn't sure about that, but in any case he interested her. When she approached the gentleman, she said she wondered if he was as exquisite at night. Suddenly, Yultashik stopped her and ordered her to stand still. Jihami looked out from behind the man and said that she had been wondering who it was for a long time. Was it the new servant the master had hired? The boy asked if he looked like a servant. The girl replied that she had never heard of young leaders hiring accompanying bodyguards before. If he had told the palace pleasure earlier, they could have sent him young and beautiful girls. What a pity. The Lord thought that the girl seems to have forgotten her original duties and is talking nonsense. She has a strong sense of pride, but she is frivolous. The thought guy turned to the man and asked him to let her pass. Yultashik immediately stepped aside. The girl replied that he was just a mere servant. As soon as the girl leaned toward him and touched his face, the young gentleman immediately grabbed her hand and asked her how long he had to be patient with her. Chihami replied that if he came to the pleasure palace, no longer have to hold back. The young gentleman asked if she was serious now. The girl replied that of course she was. He wanted her, didn't he? As soon as he asked if he should kill her, the girl immediately changed her face. Turning to the young leader, she said that he was really nasty. Seems like the guy is confident that he can kill her. She replied that she's still not engaged to a partner, so please let her be gentle with her. Anyway, he could talk about the pleasures between another time. After that asked him to please visit their palace. They would welcome the gentleman with open arms. Looking at the girl, he asked why he had to do this. Chihami replied that if he wanted to live a long life, he should definitely do it. After all, such a way to live the life of the only one befitting his status as a young leader. Looking at her with hatred, Yultashik asked the Lord if he could kill her. Looking at him, the young master replied that he would just let him teach the girl some manners. Yultashik asked wasn't she there by any means a representative of the pleasure palace? Was it light-hearted talk that she just had the desires of the pleasure palace? Looking at the man, Chihami asked what did he just say? Did she misunderstand him? Doesn't he know who she is? The man replied that he thought she was there as a messenger of the pleasure palace, coming to meet the young leader. But it looks like she's just someone who went there to sell her body. Looking at him, the girl asked if he was done. The man replied with a counter-question. Should he continue? Looking at the young lord, she said that apparently the young leader had shown disrespect to her. How should she take it? Did the man ask disrespect? Could there be anything more disrespectful than her childish words? The girl is a serious criminal who went against their cult laws. She touched the young leader's face without any permission. Second, she dared to threaten his safety. Even if they executed her now, they would still be justified in doing so. Glaring at the man, she pulled out a cold weapon and asked does he really want to die before he comes to his senses? Watching her attack, the young lord thought that the small palace really had almost zero power. What troubled personalities? He wondered if the demon cult had always been like this. Yultashik looked questioningly in the direction of the young master. He mentally told him not to kill her. Yultak heard a strange sound coming from behind the door. He immediately wanted to rush in, but the girls of the pleasure palace blocked his entrance. The guy yelled to let the damn bitches get lost. The girls' faces showed they weren't going anywhere. Chun Amu immediately thought about the fact that if the young leader died there, it would also be a plus for him. The young gentleman replied that let them not make a fuss. Nothing had happened. The girl asked how did he do it? She was sure she had touched him. But how? The young lord understood that it was a martial art that temporarily attracted internal energy and then exploded it. Since it comes from a heavenly demon divine art, the strength cannot be average. It is worthy of being called a demonic art. But the longer it goes on, the more disadvantageous it becomes for him. It is only applicable if he succeeds in meeting a much stronger opponent. It temporarily gives him overwhelming power, but he can't use it permanently yet. Looking at him, the girl asked what the hell did he do? Looking at the young master, she asked, indestructible physique? The girl said it was impossible. A hidden weapon? The master asked, is this really all that the pleasure palace boils down to? How dare they send some brat who can't even wield a sword? The master said he was disappointed. Walking up to the girl and grabbing her face, He asked what he was going to do to her after that. Chi Hami asked what the master was going to do to her. Young Chagak replied that since she dared to come for his head, maybe now it was worth hanging her head in the pleasure palace? Or should he punish her right now? The girl called him a crazy bastard. Turning away from her, the gentleman told her to forget it. Why should he waste his time on the likes of a girl? He said let her tell it to the manager at the palace. Then he asked for the next one. Glaring at him, she yelled that he would regret it if he treated her this way. The master asked what she was going to do with her skills. Yulteshchik told the gentleman that he finally got a chance to ask who he really was. The guy replied that who knows. Kneeling down, the man asked to please forgive him if he had offended him in any way. The master asked what he was doing. Tell him to get up quickly. It's okay, just don't let him do it again. The man replied that as the master wishes, he would never ask about it again. Yulteshchik began to say that while the mistress of the pleasure palace looks meek, she is actually cruel and has a more fiery temperament than anyone else. He is sure she will not just let it go. The gentleman replied that it was as he suspected. The man asked if he knew. It's not too late to call that girl back. Did the young master understand to calm her down and make her feel better? No, when they faced each other, it was only a matter of time. The man abruptly said he'd get rid of her. Even if they let her live, it would only prolong the case. Perhaps it would be better to just do it now, and then take the initiative and settle things with the pleasure palace. The young lord thought of something he had completely forgotten. This man is a demonic creature to his brain and bones. Turning to the man, the lord said he wanted to make sure he would never kill anyone unless the guy ordered him to do so. The man replied that as soon as the master ordered it, the guy realized there was no point in just killing and getting rid of someone. All he would do is build a sandcastle with mountains of corpses. The gentleman said that according to the rating records, the mistress of the pleasure palace seems to value her family very much. So let him not make any moves first. Not until he makes the first move. Master of the pleasure palace. Is he someone who can be changed? Seeing the young leader of the palace, thought what had they done to her there? How far had they been able to get? Chunim, you thought what a lustful little pervert. He must have seduced her with some kind of sorcery? Yultak thought what it felt like would be his funeral if this guy walked in there now. Seeing the young gentleman, the boy asked him where he was going. Jan Chagak replied that he had smelled enough perfume. Now is the time to smell the money. They will go to the palace of merchants. Danyewa shouted at the top of her voice. The woman asked Miss, how can a grown lady raise her voice like that? What if the palace master heard her? The girl asked, and what of it? Can't the lady even shout in the sun cult? Nanny didn't understand why this girl was so angry. Did she ask her what was wrong? Didn't the girl call her because she wanted to talk about it? Then she asked if the lady had met the young leader. The girl asked not to mention him in front of her. The woman immediately began to ask what happened. Was it because she hadn't lived there for a long time? Is it sad because she is separated from him? The girl replied how ridiculous it was. She doesn't know anything else. The girl is really going to shave her head and go back to the mountains. Nanny replied that it is common for people to marry each other to preserve their bloodlines. The girl started screaming who said she was going to marry him. She would rather marry someone she had never met before. The woman replied that he was from a respectable family and looked handsome. Danyewa replied that instead of the cult leader's location being unknown, they were more like a family that would drag them down. The woman asked her to keep her voice down, for the palace master might hear. She started yelling even more that let him listen to what she was saying. She doesn't think the cult leader is around, so what is she afraid of then? Why marry a good-for-nothing man? The master of the palace appeared and shouted who dared to say such a thing. The man ordered her to draw her sword. The girl asked if he thought she would not dare to bear her sword. Danyewa said what about her? She will repeat herself. The girl is not going to get married. She doesn't want to. He asked if she would let a simple emotion ruin the biggest event of her life. She said it's not just her emotions, it's reality. And that guy's worthless. I asked him if he didn't say that all the time. What if someone were to slip up in their training? They wouldn't be able to protect their family. But now a man is trying to sell her to that weakling? He replied that she had sworn an engagement to the Yoling leader in the name of the god of the sacred flame. Or has the girl already forgotten that? Danyewa asked she assumes he hasn't heard yet. The god of the sacred flame said that a girl doesn't have to do that if she doesn't want to. The girl shouted again that she didn't want to marry that brat. The man replied that if she really wanted it so much, then let her try to cut him. He would see if she could still talk about such a thing after the fact. Before he could finish, his hand was caught by the girl's sword. In tears, she replied that she wasn't going to do it, and she had already said earlier that she wouldn't. Then she threw down her sword and ran away. He wondered, did she train hard? Had the girl already reached the highest level? He asked if the squad leader was there. Did the man ask what he needed him for? He replied that she was still his one and only daughter. Let him bring the young leader there. The man replied that he would. It's all he can do for her. Let them see that the young leader's martial arts are at a level they are comfortable with. It will be his gift to her, as it was to her father. The young gentleman thought Fergana horse. This breed is hard to find even in the Gu Mountains. It looks like they put a lot of effort into getting it. Getting down from his horse, the lad suggested we set up a halt and rest a bit. Chun Amu told the young leader that they had almost arrived. In fact, they didn't have to rest there. Young Chagak thought that it looked like he still didn't realize where he was. Did the master ask him his name, Chun Amu? The guy replied that he seemed to remember his name. The gentleman replied that, of course, the guy was trying to kill him. He replied that he wasn't trying to hurt the gentleman at all. The lad replied that he would hear the details from the culprit himself. He then asked if he was the heir to the merchant palace. Jun Amu asked what he meant by that. He also has an older brother. Of course, if he were to succeed him, he could be much more successful than him. But unfortunately, luck was not on his side, and he was born later. The master thought that someone who was disrespectful to him had been sent there. Is he looking down on him? No, he doesn't. Not since he sent the Fergana horse. Rising up, the young master asked, so does that mean he can kill him? The boy asked why he was saying such a thing so suddenly. The master replied that he would eventually die anyway. Wouldn't it be better to use him to relieve the master's boredom? Yultak immediately grabbed him. Chun Amu begged to be released. Looking at the forbidden squad, he asked, what are they doing? Are they really just going to let him kill him? Taking out his dagger, the lord said it would cut him quite a bit. Looking at the squad, the young lord thought he recognized it. The person in charge there is clearly someone else. He ordered Yultashik not to answer him. The master yelled for him to stop making noise. The guy hadn't even done anything yet. He would slit his noisy throat first. Suddenly, Mu yelled out what Byron was doing. Have him get those bastards away from him immediately. Taking off his hat, then turning to the young leader, the man asked him to please stop. The young gentleman asked who he was. Bowing, the man apologized for not introducing himself earlier. He is Chung Byron, the person in charge of the forbidden squad in the merchant palace. The young gentleman told him to let him remember once and for all. If he overstepped his boundaries again, he would be in trouble. The guy asked, does the merchant palace like to spy? What a nasty group of people. The man replied that he just kept quiet to protect him in case of an emergency. Master asked the man sure he wasn't just spying on him. Byron replied that making sure he never showed what he was fully capable of was part of the basics. There are times when a master must fool his allies in order to later fool his enemies as well. The boy thought that he was completely different from newcomers like Chi Hami and Chun Amu. If anything were to happen to the young master, the Sun cult would be in big trouble indeed. The gentleman replied that he was grateful. But was the man sure it wasn't because the situation could become dangerous for the merchant palace? Byron replied that somewhat, he would make sure the Lord was safe. With a hard look at the man, the young gentleman told him to never try to cheat him again. The boy is not going to forgive him a second time. Soon they reached the trade palace. Byron asked, how is Mr. Trade Palace? It was his first time there, right? The boy replied that he did not think there would be a sea under the heavenly mountain. Byron told him that it was not a sea, but a river. It is formed when the endless snow melts. It's called the Hot Sea. In the past, this river was mistaken for the sea, hence the name. There is a tribal nation there known as the Oirins. Yulharan looked around and said how beautiful it was. Yulharan's father added that the shopping palace hadn't changed a bit. The girl wondered if the father had been there before. Looking at him, Byron said that on second thought, he did look familiar. The man asked if he could recognize his nickname. Yultashik replied that his nickname was Bloody Azura. Once inside, Yultak thought it was really far away. Are they really about to reach the palace? Byron told the young master that they were there, but suddenly, a strange man appeared before their eyes. Zhang Salmon asked my lord why he was there. Yuljan replied that his father was worried. He wondered if the man had forgotten what he had promised. He asked, "Don't they know that the Oirits are going through a sandstorm right now?" He doesn't really like the tone of his voice. "It's not easy to make a living now." He replied that it was fine. Yuljin said that he heard his son had experienced an unpleasant incident that took place in the restaurant. As the leader of the association, he regretted the incident and would like to meet with him. Samin replied that this was not necessary. Wants to meet him, then the man will just ask him to contact the leader. The boy asked, "Isn't he at the palace?" "He didn't go to the palace of the small sun, did he?" "I told Yuljin that if he's there and something goes wrong, it could cause him and the young leader to have a misunderstanding." The man replied that he wasn't sure since the guy just does whatever he wants. Yuljin replied that he would then go and look for him. The man said there was no need to go to him. Just as my lord drew a part of his sword, the flower pot behind the man's back began to fall. He said that plants with anthracnose can still survive if detected early. You can just cut off the affected leaves. But if the plant has been left alone for too long, you will need to cut it off at the root. To apologize for his rudeness, he will take care of the Oirit problem. Salmon thought that it looked like he wasn't very far from reaching the highest realm of demons. Dewa asked if he was just going to leave the trade palace. She told him that the Oirits of the dust are only making excuses. They are cutting back on the amount of money they used to give them. Yuljin asked Dewa to refrain from asking unnecessary questions. The girl is the commander of the support squad. After the guy pulled his hand and the bird perched on it, he asked anyone he knew had come there. The young master saw Yultak's older brother. He wondered if he was in the palace of the blood arts. He wondered if the boy was his side. Yuljin told his brother that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. As soon as he approached, the lord asked what business could there be in the blood arts palace. The guy replied that is there any reason why he shouldn't be there? What about him, the young leader? What is he doing there? The young gentleman replied that it was the same with him. He had no reason not to be there. Walking past him, the guy said that since they didn't seem to intend to explain their reasons to each other, he was deflecting. Hearing his brother's voice, the guy said he's still just as pathetic, isn't he? Turning to Chun Am, Yuljin suggested that he talk for a while. The boy agreed with the association leader. He asked the lord why he was there with the White Battle 7 support squad. It wasn't for him, was it? The young master thought about the fact that according to Yuljin, he is the eldest son of the master of the blood arts. So Yultak is his brother. Yulharan said that Yuljin is currently ranked 15th in the Sun cult. He is the eldest son of the master of the blood arts palace, and is also the head of a separate force known as the White Martial 7 support squad. The girl's father replied that he doesn't even look like he's been doing this for several years. Impressive. The girl added that the Blood Arts Palace has the most powerful strength among the 7 palaces of the Sun cult. I said the master of the palace. I am Yulchin. Looking at the boy, the lord asked him if he was hungry. Yultak asked why the lord was asking him that. The lad replied that it was just for no reason. He asked what was wrong with the atmosphere, after which he suggested we stop right now. The young gentleman thought that he was the only one who was tense. Yultak said that there was nothing special about it. The man who is the master of the Blood Arts Palace and ranked 2nd is really his father, but since he is his son by a concubine, he never received any recognition from him. His family may be known as stale, but his older brother never treated him as if he were the son of a concubine. He even taught him martial arts and showed him care. The lord thought about the fact that his skills in martial arts were not that great. The guy kept saying that he wasn't so cold to him only because he had become disillusioned with him since the guy started wasting his life dragging around with the young leader visiting brothels and other brothels. Even though the young leader is still good for nothing, he is much better than he used to be. The boy is sure that soon his brother will see a different side of him. Looking at the young gentleman, Yultak asked why he was going to go there or something. Everyone knows that Palace has ties in the escort establishment of Trade Palace. It may sound like he speaks well of them because they are his family, but Palace is really still very well connected. The lord thought that the fact that they had influence in the merchant palace meant that they were both on the same side. Jan Shagik replied that it was good. In that case, they let them go and let there be more information about them. They will check to see if there are any signs of them turning against them. Yultak replied that okay. First they would rest today, as he was suddenly interrupted by the lord and said that right away. The guy thought that the merchant palace and the pleasure palace were 2 places he should visit. It wasn't because of the information regarding the silk. This is to keep their group moving, After all, they need capital transportation. That's why the Murim Alliance not only has martial sects inside, they also have many banks, trading, and escort establishments. But that's not all. When they're out on business, they notice most of the drinking establishments and inns are closely connected. Trouble is, the only card he holds in his hand is the title of young leader. For a man to want to be on his side instead of going over to the side of the master of the Blood Arts Palace who is being considered to be the next cult leader, he must have ambitions of his own. Since the Lord has nothing to offer, it will be difficult to make a deal with him. They need to find a way to completely isolate the trade palace from the others first. Suddenly, the squad leader, Chong Byron, appeared in the room. He said that the palace master had finished everything he had to do and asked if the master could meet with him now. The Lord asked his youth restored? The face he sees now is very different from what he saw before. After bowing, the man said he was sorry for disrespecting the Lord. The boy thought that he must have really used a mask made of human skin. Jan Chagik replied that he was sure he had already told him not to let the guy cheat on him again. Apologizing, he replied that the situation was out of his control. The gentleman asked if he thought he was joking, that all his words are a joke, looking down on him. Byron replied that he did not. He only came there because of Jiang Saimon's sincerity. Ever since he said that he would pay for all the sins his son had committed. Looks like he shouldn't have come. Byron replied that he will let go of his head and apologize to him. Please let him be calm. The master asked, is this his real face? The boy replied that this is what he originally looked like. Jan Chagik said he couldn't trust him. How is that possible when you don't know what could be in that room? How can he trust them and meet their palace master? The young lord said that he was returning to the palace of the small sun. The boy immediately asked him to reconsider his decision. He said he'd personally make sure nothing like this ever happened again. The master replied that he did it twice, who said he wouldn't do it a third time. How can he trust his word? Let him tell the master of the palace that he will never again hold business meetings with him. Byron asked the young master what he needed to do to earn his trust. The guy figured he wasn't usually the type to allow himself to be treated this way. The reason he shows this side of himself so easily is that he is good for nothing. The young gentleman thought that maybe then he would drive him even more crazy. The guy told him to write it down then. Byron asked what should he write? Sir replied, who knows? Maybe he will say differently later? Let him write it all down. The guy started writing that he, the commander of the forbidden squad of the merchant palace, Chong Byron. Suddenly, he asked the young master, is he going to ask him to defend him? Without thinking long, the young lord replied that he was going to destroy the entire small sun palace. Byron shouted that this is absurd. The Lord knows how many people want to hurt him, doesn't he? He's just trying to protect him from them. Master said so. That's why he kept his identity from him, only to test him. So why did the son of the merchant palace try to kill him? He said that in his opinion the boy was a more dangerous man. Byron shouted that that wasn't true at all. The master replied that if that wasn't the case, he could just write it down. If his thoughts are returned, then even if the guy doesn't die, he still won't be able to survive in the end. Seeing his shaking hands, the master said let him forget. He should not have come to such a dangerous place. Instead, he should have just gone to the pleasure palace. Byron shouted that he would write it all down. He asked, is that enough? The young gentleman replied that it was good. Let him write down the rest too. The Lord said that the palace of the lesser sun would be the proof of it. If he breaks this promise, he will be considered a traitor. A plaque issued by the Sun cult in place of the imperial family. Identification of a demonic cult. That it's something as important as someone's life, since it's the only way demonic cult people can identify each other. The only reason he would agree to such a certain idea was definitely one of two things. Either he's very sure of what's being done, or he thinks the palace of the lesser sun is just a joke. But whatever it is, Chong Byron must protect the small sun palace no matter what. The boy told the palace master that the young leader had arrived. Salmon asked him to be calm. The man said he asked to meet him later because he was afraid the gentleman would be too tired. He hopes the guy doesn't mind. The guy replied that he was thinking. That didn't mean he couldn't understand what the man had done since he had put so much effort into the preparation. Salmon replied that the gift had been ready for a long time. Yin Chagik replied that he had been to the Heavenly Demon Gallery a few days ago. Small gifts would not be enough for him. The man replied that it wasn't difficult. They could just share a lot of those little things to supplement the whole deficiency. The gentleman replied that he was not sure about that. Salmon replied that it's because he hasn't tried it yet, but after he tries it, he'll understand. They just need to share things just once. The young gentleman seemed to want a lot of things. The man could give it all to him, if he wanted it, of course. Young Chagak said that it seems that all this time, he was wrong about the master of the trading palace. If the guy became how magnanimous he is, he would come more often. Looking at him, the man said he could stay there forever if he wanted. The gentleman said that he seemed to be living quite a happy life. Salmon asked what the boy meant. The Lord replied that there is a saying that says that parents are sometimes so preoccupied with loving their children that they don't even notice their own actions. And since he has such a precious son, it is impossible for him to live a miserable life. However, had he become too ignorant if he was not even aware of his own actions? He should have rushed out to beg for forgiveness, but instead the man had ordered his subordinates to lock him in the guest room, and was now sitting in a higher place talking to him. The gentleman asked if the man would confess to conspiracy against treason, or something like that. Laughing, the man replied that as expected of the young leader. Considering how much he had grown, the future of the Sun cult was certainly bright. Since he had covered up his immature son's mistake like that, the man would be very happy if the Lord stayed with them. He motioned for him to take his seat. Without going around the table, the boy walked straight across it and sat down in the man's seat. He realized he'd dealt with people like Salmon before. Leader of the wealthiest organization on the Central Plains, leader of the Full Moon Trade Group, and leader of the Beggar Sect. He was once asked by the leader of a beggar sect why they are both so similar despite being on completely opposite ends. The one who has everything and the one who doesn't need it at all. And oddly enough, this person is like both of them. When dealing with people like them, you just have to scratch them where they want to be scratched. Turning to the master of the merchant palace, the guy said that he hated to complicate things. After he finished his isolated training, his father disappeared, and after that he had no other family. It's just not like the past. It gave him a headache just thinking about it. The man asked, "Is that really true?" He replied that he meant what he said. He didn't really care. The guy is just someone who sits in the cult leader's seat, since that position has been empty for a while now. Then he asked if he knew what he was talking about. The master thought they might be on the same wavelength, so he came there to visit him. But not only did they target his life, but they were so stupid. You greetings. What a disappointment this is for him. Salmon replied that he seemed to have disrespected him by the fact that a lot of things had been bothering him lately. He hopes the Lord will graciously forgive him with his heart as wide as the sea. He said that he was also worried about what he should do because of his son's impoliteness. The man really thought about it, for he is his faithful servant. The master asked if this was really so. Then he decided to listen. Let him tell him what conclusion he had come to after much thought and worry. Smiling wryly, the man said that he had prepared a gift for the Lord. It's a very special, precious gift. Salmon is sure he'll love it. As suddenly he called Byron, entering. The guy was carrying a red box in his hands. Placing it on the table, Byron opened the box in which the young gentleman saw the dagger. Samin asked if the young master had heard of the 5 sacred implements before. The boy wondered if this could be one of the 5 divine weapons. The man replied that it was so. He had it specially prepared for the Lord. It's a demonic dagger of sacred fire. Then he asked if the Lord liked the gift. Samin said it's something even the Lord couldn't get, and he's going to give it to him. But even that's not all. The man would make sure that tons of gold bars were sent to the palace of the small sun every month. Samin to him a palace that will be much bigger than the merchant's palace. But what does the Lord think about making a deal? Naturally, he must take the place of the leader of the cult. The palace merchants are supporting him. He, Chang Saman, will assist the Lord in his ascension to the throne. Staring at him intently, the Lord asked, is he really asking the guy to become a cult leader? The man asked, is it unnatural? The importance of the imperial family. It would be meaningless if someone other than him took that position. He said it would be a betrayal, and the gods would be angry. Guy thought of talking about the imperial family in a demonic cult. How ridiculous. Jan Shagik replied that he thought it made so much sense. The man replied that as expected of the young leader. He could understand what Salmon was getting at. The guy replied that he's awesome, but based only on what the Lord knows. The man supports the master of the Blood Arts Palace. What does he have to gain by doing something like this? Zhang Salmon answered, what an interesting question. The young master asked, what is it? He replied that the fact that the gentleman was interested in such matters. The man realized that, however, he was not one to think so much. The guy didn't understand how Ma Chongso had lived his life before. Sir asked if he was a corpse, or something like that. Is the guy incapable of thinking? The man replied that it wasn't that he couldn't tell him that, it was just that he didn't understand something. The gentleman asked, and what was it? He began to say that if you think about it, he heard that the Lord had a bodyguard that no one had ever seen before, and also that the guy had been absent from the small sun palace for quite some time after returning. Perhaps he visited one of the other 7 sun cult palaces before arriving there? If the young master made a deal with them, perhaps they gave him a bodyguard to turn a blind eye? That's really great news. Well, if someone had sent the Lord there, then it would all make sense. The guy thought that he really did go to the village of the Bay of Tears. After talking to him in front of the others, he realized that he was definitely Chun Amu's father. The man asked instead of a suitable fighting palace or a pleasure palace to organize such a plan. Let him not say only that it is a palace of bloody arts. The young gentleman replied that he had no idea what the man was talking about. Salmon replied that he shouldn't pretend he didn't know anything. Why was he looking for him then? The guy replied that he had already said why. Angry, the man asked if he thought he would believe his words. Watching what was happening, Yin Chagak thought to himself, had he increased his internal energy with elixirs? How much did he consume? He has a huge amount of internal energy. Since he used money to increase his internal energy, he naturally put it above martial arts. The man began to say that if they had all already made a deal amongst themselves, why was the young leader there? Are they all in on this? He said before that. Shouldn't they decide who owns the boat? Looking at the man, the Lord said that however the merchant palace was not the only place where there was money. Salmon asked so he was going to go to the pleasure palace? While each of the 7 palaces of the Sun cult have their own martial arts powers and powerful influences, a very different story would be if they look at the roles they play. The Palace of Sacred Fire is in charge of governance. The Palace of Arts is in charge of martial affairs. The Palace of Fighters and the Palace of Swords are responsible for punishments. The Poison Palace plays the role of a large medicinal warehouse. The problem lies in the Merchant Palace and the Pleasure Palace, as they are both responsible for finances and diplomacy. Now that war is looming, the others are probably trying to join forces with those 2 palaces since they want money and information. It's the same with the information on the silk. That's why he has no choice but to meet with those houses for the real information that would come from the brothels. The gentleman replied that depending on which boat he gets on will determine his future, as it will already be decided whether the boat can move or not. The guy thought that it looked like the master of the merchant palace still couldn't trust him. The young master will let him believe what he wants to believe. The boy said that's what the man told him to tell him. The man replied that okay, he would believe the guy this time. But now was not the time. He would have to meet the man first and then make a decision. Yang Chagak said he could take his time. Since the man had put so much effort into that gift, he would accept it. Just an FYI, the boat fee will be 30% of the merchant palace assets. That's really cheap. The guy will give him a month, have him send them to the small sun palace. Besides, let him think of a boat that will offer him a better deal. Now, he has some business with the master of the pleasure palace. The man shouted for him to rest there before heading out. He took it upon himself to prepare for the Lord to stay there. The guy asked if he had to do it. Then he said he'd stay there for a few days, just for whatever the man did. He can go mind his own business. Salmon shouted that he was a very capable person after all. How dare that lustful pervert ask that? Byron asked him to remain calm. He asked the guy thinking the man could keep his cool. How dare they pull such dirty tricks? Suddenly, the guy said that maybe it wasn't one of the palaces either. The man asked what he meant. Who else but palaces could do such a thing? Byron once said that he didn't know about the Central Plains, but it's impossible there, because the palaces would try to avoid such a thing. Moreover, didn't the young leader mention that man? The man wondered in that case. Did the Elders Association do this? Byron tells the man what he feels. There's a good chance it's them. But it may not necessarily be something bad for them. He told me that he would end up supporting the Palace of the Bloody Arts anyway if they left things as they were. Aren't the Oirat requests and abuse of power getting worse? Did I tell Yuljin that he would take care of the case? The man replied that he'd just let him go. The guy added that if IU still happen every day, then they might get even more requests when the Master of the Blood Arts becomes the cult leader. The Oirats kidnapped that man last year. Even the forces of the northern plains were growing then. The master of the fighter palace will probably join hands with the master of the pleasure palace, and the elder association will hold hands with the young leader. That means a big war is coming. Wouldn't it be great if they just profited from all that? The man said they had something to lose. Didn't they just give away the demonic dagger of sacred fire? The boy replied that it was just a game played by the young leader, who was himself a puppet. Byron said that before coming there, it seems he had already put his paws on Chihami. The man started yelling, "Why is the guy only talking about it now?" He asked for details. The guy replied that he did not know exactly, as it happened in the room. But the young leader is known as a lustful pervert. He's convinced that something untoward happened in that room. Salmon replied that in that case, the mistress of the pleasure palace wouldn't get away with it. For him to be so reckless, he doesn't even know what he's gotten himself into. He said the merchant's palace isn't the only place with decent finances. The man will save him if only the guy will get on his knees and beg for forgiveness. Byron replied that he didn't think it was the right thing to do. They must save him and bring him back at the right time. They have no reason to let things go to hell. The man asked, wouldn't it be a good decision to take advantage of the situation and get rid of the pleasure palace? The boy replied that in his opinion, it was the wrong decision. He thought that if the palace of the small sun was destroyed, it would be the end for him too. Salmon ordered him to follow secretly to the pleasure palace and bring him back at the right time. He must not die, for their goods must be in the best condition. Since he'll have to pay for the boat anyway, he'll give up first. Have them send the gold bars to the palace of the lesser sun. The young lord thought that if the master of the merchant palace suddenly saw a mountain of gold, he would surely drop everything he held in his hands. As they passed by, they heard a man talking about how he thought he was going to die on the way to the horse market. A friend asked him what happened. Had he met the Shaolin monks? The man replied that if they had gotten in his way, they would have been all he had left. Then he said it didn't matter, and asked if his friend knew what he saw there. Don't let him be surprised. He was going to the brothel, and on the way he saw that the whole top of the hill was black as pitch. He thought he was just tired because his wife wouldn't let him rest. The man closed his eyes, opened them again, and there was a 10,000-strong army. He couldn't believe his eyes. The man said it was bullshit. Most likely, it was some beggar sect minnows going to collect the leftovers from the feast. He went on to say that War Minister Wu Jian was there. He blocked off the horse market and the surrounding area of the city. It seems to the man that it was because the emperor wasn't around and his brother decided to take his place. Yultak asked that he couldn't become emperor just by taking the throne, could he? The girl replied that what was going on in the Oirat tribe now seemed to be quite serious. The guy asked if she believed what he said, that they might need the sun from somewhere. The girl replied that everyone was talking about their attack. Yultak said they're all talking nonsense. You can't believe what those brothel guys say. Suddenly, Yulheron saw a man sitting on the ground. The girl asked if he was okay. The man shouted if he looked like he was okay. The father told the girl that there was no need to pay attention to the likes of him. Yultak asked her if she didn't know she couldn't afford to show compassion within the Sun cult. Plus, he looks like a member of an unnamed squad that has retired. He's most likely injured because he let himself go too far. On your feet, the man yelled for the guy to shut up. If it wasn't for those Oirat bastards. The guy told the old man to be careful what he said. Then he asked what's up with the Oirats. He might not realize he's losing his head if he doesn't choose his words. The man replied that the Irati block the Silk Road and remove anyone they don't like. They wouldn't have dared raise their heads before. They're only acting like this because the head of the cult isn't there. He didn't realize what the Blood Arts Palace was doing. The man asked the guy wants him to do it again. He said the Oirats were the first to swing swords. They stabbed him just for looking at them. Seeing the man stand up, the guy asked where he was going. The man replied that all the wars, who had just turned 30, said the people at the top would rather listen to the brothel people than them. They told him to just run. They probably didn't know. Those at the top don't care about the old cripple or the brothel people. The man said he had to do something even if he went one. Going to rescue those who were taken prisoner. When the young gentleman saw them, he said, "So this is where everyone is gathered." He had already found out about the situation on the road there. They realized what it meant. The Oirats had killed more than a couple of people. Yultak replied that there was no way they could go to such lengths. The girl asked if the guy could guarantee it. He started shouting that they wouldn't do such a thing and that was it. Yulheron asked, So he had no proof? The guy said it was crazy. Maybe she saw it herself? The girl replied that everyone was talking about it. Hadn't he heard? Yultak did not want to calm down and asked what about what he was saying. The young master was watching everything that was going on. He asked everyone to calm down. Suddenly, the people around him saw that it was a young gentleman. Then they decided to leave. Janshagak ordered everyone to sit down. Looking around, he wondered if they were all going to leave. Yultak said that even if those Oirat bastards allowed themselves a lot, they weren't that bad. The girl asked how he knew that. Suddenly, without thinking, the guy replied that he was raised among them. Like he said, the guy is a bastard. He knows because his mom is Oirat. Let them not misunderstand him. He's not saying they're great. But why would they and the Palace of Bloody Arts suddenly get involved with the Sun cult? The young gentleman thought, what is wrong with Orthodox sects? He figured the man wasn't aiming to become a cult leader, so he doesn't try to harm him. But he wants them to feud with the Palace of the Blood Arts. If they're feuding and the Oirat tribe is involved, then they're probably collecting captives at the behest of the Blood Arts Palace. The young lord thought of what they had to save them. Even though they are a demonic cult, the way of the warrior is not in political intrigue. People sat there not realizing when they could get up. They thought he was hiding outside and waiting for them to get up. When Yultak woke up, the first thing he did was to look for the young master. He wondered where he had disappeared to again. Suddenly, he saw a note on the table. When he read it, the guy thought, what the hell is he talking about? Was he really going to go out there alone? At that moment, Yultashik and his daughter came out of the room. The girl asked the young master if he was awake yet. The boy replied that he thought the young master had become calmer, but he seemed to be crazy. Holding out a note to the girl, it said that he had left because he had realized a lot of things. Let them return to the small palace of the sun. There would be a barrage of criticism if they didn't return periodically. Yultak didn't know what he was talking about. The guy had the feeling that the gentleman was studying literature, not martial arts. Looking at them, the guy told them that it was no time to admire his letter. Their young master was gone. Yultashik told him that he didn't need to worry about Sir. The guy started yelling. Is he even worried about him? How can a man say such a thing? Can he guarantee that the gentleman will return safely? Showing the boy the letter again, the man said it was the Lord's order. They go to the small palace of the sun. Watching the man walk in the letter, the guy thought he was what? Using a purifying fire? Did the man get all his inner energy back? Is that why he was acting so defiant? As he left the room, Yultashik asked if the guy was coming. He ran after the man and said he was. Looking around, the guy thought similar. Those mountains really are huge. Someone could really die searching for a demonic cult. Looking into the distance, he wondered, didn't they say the Oirat tribe was in the northwest of the hot sea? The young gentleman thinks he'll know everything when he gets there. Seeing the strangers, the man asked them to stop, then asked what the man from the Han clan was doing there. The girl pulled out 2 balls and asked her to pass. The men shouted, how dare she? Who does the girl think she is? Tewa replied that if they wanted to live, let them let go of the axe and cover their necks with their hands. Calling her an arrogant bitch, the man yelled for them to grab her. Smirking, in just a couple movements of her swords, the girl dealt with them. Everyone else drew their bows and pointed them in her direction. Suddenly, a voice told them to let them pass. Ayuljan ordered Taiwa to raise her head. The girl replied that it was as the Lord wished. Once inside, the man told Yuljan that it had been quite some time. It was the chief of the Oirat tribe, Grandmaster Jason. The guy replied that he was worried that something had happened to them, but they seemed to be fine. In their language, they call him Yinsen Taisher. He is the head of many tribes with impressive power comparable to the Tang dynasty and the Northern Plains. The man said Grandmaster, after which he asked the guy, do you think he qualifies for that title? Yuljan replied that to him, it sounded like he was going to become Khan. The man replied that nothing was impossible for him now. Yuljan replied that now that they had said what they wanted, they should stop making all that senseless noise. Jason asked if he was talking about the merchant's palace. The guy asked, does that mean he already knows? The man replied that he thinks he should pretend he doesn't know anything. Bowing his head, the boy asked, is this what his father wanted? Instead of an answer, he received counter-questions about whether the lad wielded a bow. The man told what they say. The commander made an ivory bow and used it, just like this one. As a man in whose veins the blood of Khan flows, does it not seem to him that a man is best suited for this bow? The lad asks him who is best suited for the bow. Jason asked what was the difference between them living far away in the mountains, but with the blood in their veins of the northern imperial Yao dynasty, and to them, those who are unable to continue the great Yuan clan. Looking at the boy, he ordered him to go back to his father. With one blow, the guy broke the bow. Yuljin said that if someone is not capable of taking possession of something, he should know when to retreat. They say the Secretary of Defense Military Affairs. He's going to seal off all the entrances to Beijing. By capturing their emperor, the Grandmaster has given them a reason to increase the size of their army. He's going to be Khan of the Northern Plains? Let him do what he wants. The Sun Cult will take care of the Central Plains, provided he releases the followers who are being held captive. The boy will tell his father. As for the rudeness they showed today, they will stop there. Watching them leave, the man thought he was a tiger cub who didn't listen to anyone. I guess the guy's having a good time, too. Huh? Calling Wanansu to him. The man said he would terrify the world once he became Khan. First, let them use the emperor as an offering. They're going to prison. Yuljin told the girl that he was going back to the palace. Dewa replied that she would escort him. He asked her to sit down. She was still bleeding. Looking at him, the girl said she was fine. The guy asked, is she trying to show everyone where they are? Have her sit down and stop the bleeding. Once she thanked him, he replied that it was a radio favor for the emperor's family, and said he didn't need to be thanked. Transferring crimes, it's a curse and a foolish way to preserve the lineage of the Northern Imperial family, a family that would rather their inferiors take the punishment instead of them. The boy mentally questioned his father. How far would they go?